Hey guys, for thousands of years, clues were buried, texts were erased, and entire civilizations disappeared without explanation. Tonight, we uncover the ancient secrets they never wanted the world to see. What you're about to learn may change everything you thought you knew about human history. Let's start. Manuscript sown with starlight. The phrase drifted through the narrator's mind like a lantern flame behind frosted glass, never spoken aloud, never shown on any title card, but gently breathing beneath the story as it began. Night had settled over the high plateau, in a hush that felt almost deliberate, as if the world itself paused to listen. A thin crescent moon traced the rim of the sky, and the wind rolled quietly across the stones, brushing them with the same patience it had carried for thousands of years. And there, in that stillness, lay a manuscript so old that its very pages seemed to tremble with the weight of forgotten constellations. It had been found in 1923, under the remains of an early Neolithic hearth near Göbekli Tepe, an excavation site long known for its immense carved pillars and enigmatic animal reliefs. The archaeologists had expected stone tools, bone fragments, maybe faint traces of pigments. But not this. Not a fragile bundle of thin fibers stitched together with something that glittered faintly even in darkness. The manuscript's surface, if one could even call it paper, felt like dried silk woven with impossibly fine threads. Under lamplight, those threads shimmered with the pale blue suggestion of starlight, as though each strand had captured some echo of the night sky it once mirrored. Scholars later argued that the shimmer came from crushed mica embedded in the fibers, but even that explanation felt too convenient, too eager to anchor something strange to something familiar. And so, for years, the debate was left to drift quietly between academic circles. Yet, it wasn't the shimmer that haunted those who saw it. It was the markings. They weren't letters, not symbols, not numbers. They were more like pathways, thin, wandering lines looping and branching like the trails of fireflies moving in perfect unison. When the manuscript was first unrolled beneath the soft glow of lanterns, one of the researchers whispered that the shapes resembled constellations. Not the modern star charts we know, but constellations older than the Greek, older than the Akkadian, older than even the myths that once lived around the Euphrates. They mapped something, but not the sky as we see it. There were patterns where no stars exist now, clusters too bright for a world without telescopes, entire swaths of luminous geometry that implied an observer positioned far from Earth or long before the firmament took its current shape. For decades, scholars still debated whether the mapping represented a lost astronomical tradition or something far stranger. Some insisted it depicted supernova remnants seen by ancient skywatchers' events, bright enough to etch themselves into living memory. Others suggested the map recorded migration paths of early peoples, encoded as celestial metaphors, but there were always a few who sat quietly at the edges of conferences and leaned in just enough to whisper, "Or perhaps it was never meant for us." That murmur, soft as dust shifting in the dark, never appeared in any publication. But in stories told over quiet dinners, in the long hallways of universities after midnight, it persisted, because there was something else, something the discovery logs did not mention. The manuscript moved, not dramatically, not trembling or twisting, but it shifted ever so slightly when held near heat, as if warmth awakened some dormant reaction in the fibers. When a hand lantern drew close, the markings brightened by a shade, tracing faint glimmers along their tiny pathways. The researchers chalked it up to minerals responding to temperature. But one night, when everyone else had gone to sleep, a junior assistant swore she saw a single line lengthen, curving just beyond its original edge. She refused to return to the chamber after that. The next day, she left the site entirely. Her notes, scattered and frantic, contained only one clear sentence. "It's not finished being written." Of course, her claim was dismissed politely. Excavations are stressful. Fatigue breeds hallucination. Fieldwork has a way of bending reality at its edges. And yet, years later, her words would quietly resurface in conversations about the manuscript's odd resilience. No matter how carefully the researchers stored it, no matter how controlled the environment, it never aged. It never crumbled. Moisture didn't warp it. Dryness didn't crack it. Light didn't fade it. It stayed as it had been, untouched by time, as if preserved by something other than nature. The only significant damage occurred on the day it was first uncovered. A small tear near the lower edge, where a stone tool had struck it during excavation. That tear never widened. It simply remained, frozen, like a wound that refused to heal and refused to worsen. A curious detail lingered. The stitching thread, metallic yet soft, was unlike any material found elsewhere at the site. Analyses suggested it contained traces of meteoritic iron, fragments of the cosmos. A fringe researcher once proposed that the thread itself was woven from the residue of a meteor that fell around 10,000 BCE. But that idea, like so many others, drifted into the quieter corners of academia, the corners where things too unusual to disprove are simply left alone. What troubled scholars most, however, wasn't the material, the markings, or the shimmering surface. It was the manuscript's orientation. It could only be read if one could call it reading by holding it at a slight angle, aligning the lines with the faint glow of dusk light. Morning light revealed nothing. Lantern light revealed too much, overwhelming the delicate traces. But dusk made it breathe. The lines became faint silver rivers. The shapes formed faint celestial maps, and if one stared long enough, a sense of movement stirred behind the patterns, as though a journey was unfolding across the page, slow and tireless. It was as if the manuscript waited for the moment day surrendered to night, as though dusk alone unlocked its quiet voice. Some believed it described a seasonal observation. Others claimed it illustrated ceremonial paths. But one archaeologist, a quiet man named Lothar Stein, wrote something that never reached official publication but lingered in his private notes. It responds to the dimming of the world, as though it remembers the first night. That sentence remained tucked between brittle pages of his journal for years, unseen by anyone. But even without knowing his words, those who visited the manuscript felt something very similar, a sensation of being watched not by an entity, but by time itself, as though the page had witnessed an age when humanity was not yet separate from the stars, when stories were carried not in ink, but in shimmering threads woven from night. In hushed conversations around campfires, excavators spoke of a legend barely mentioned in regional folklore of a sky weaver who once stitched the night into patterns meant to guide early wanderers. Some believed the manuscript was part of that myth. Others believed the myth was born from the manuscript. And still, no one could explain why the night it was discovered. A faint streak of light arched silently across the sky above the dig site. A meteor, perhaps, or something older, something that had wandered long enough to recognize the glimmer of its own lost thread lying exposed beneath the earth. The team called it coincidence. They packed their equipment. They archived their findings. But the desert remembers differently. Every evening, when the wind grows colder and the sky turns the color of fading ink, the plateau hums with a quiet patience, as though waiting for someone to unroll the manuscript again, as though the stars overhead still follow the pathways traced in those shimmering lines, guiding the patient observer toward a secret long overdue. And tonight, that hum feels stronger, as though something beneath the earth is preparing to rise into the story. A soft tremor rolls through the stones. Something is beginning. Bones that chose their keepers. The title did not appear anywhere in the excavation notes, nor in any academic summary, yet it drifted like a low echo beneath the unfolding narrative, as though the earth itself whispered it whenever the wind shifted across old burial grounds. The desert night had deepened since the manuscript first stirred the edges of curiosity, settling into a colder, quieter breath. Beyond the plateau, where the stars spread like patient watchers, another mystery waited beneath a layer of sand so fine it moved like water in the lantern glow. It was here, in this shifting landscape, that a discovery unsettled even the most seasoned archaeologists, because the bones they uncovered behaved as though they had chosen where and with whom they wished to rest. The site lay 6 kilometers northeast of the manuscript's original find, near a limestone outcrop pocked with shallow caves. The team had expected animal remains, goat, boar, perhaps early domesticated dogs, but instead they uncovered a burial pattern so deliberate, so precise in its arrangement, that even the calmest voices wavered. 11 human skeletons, each separated by identical distances, each facing the same direction toward a patch of dark sky that remained starless even on clear nights, and each positioned around a central deposit of polished stones shaped like teardrops. But what haunted the researchers most was not the number of skeletons. It was their posture. Every skeleton lay curled on its left side, hands folded beneath the cheek, as though sleeping, as though waiting. And each skull was angled slightly upward, toward that same starless patch of sky. Even the smallest bones were meticulously arranged, so precisely that the slightest disturbance of sand revealed interlocking joints positioned with tender care. This was not the work of scavengers, not the result of natural collapse, not a burial rushed by danger or drought. This was choreography, intention, design. The first to notice the disturbing uniformity was Dr. Yara Ilan, a bioarchaeologist known for her steady demeanor and her unshakable skepticism toward dramatic interpretations. She had spent years analyzing prehistoric burials throughout Anatolia, but when she knelt beside the first of the skeletons, its thin ribcage glowing faintly beneath the lantern, she whispered a single breathless sentence into the quiet. They were placed with affection. An odd detail, perhaps, but something in the bones supported her intuition. There were no signs of violence, no fractures, no weapon marks, no scattered pieces that would suggest hurried interment. Instead, each skeleton showed signs of careful preparation, limbs gently folded, fingers arranged with meticulous grace. Even the smallest bones in the feet were aligned so perfectly that archaeologists joked it was as if the deceased had arranged themselves. But late one night, as lanterns flickered in the cold wind, that joke lost its warmth. A junior researcher, young, eager, often too blunt, reviewed the positions and muttered, half laughing, half uneasy, "It's like the bones chose the people who would find them." The others chuckled politely, until the next morning, when the excavation logs revealed something no one could easily explain. Each skeleton had been found not by assigned digging order, but by chance, by unrelated members of the team wandering slightly off their grids, drawn inexplicably toward the exact spots where bones lay hidden, as though the earth itself had guided them. No one said it aloud, but everyone felt it. This sensation only deepened when they uncovered the 11th skeleton, the smallest of the group, likely a child. Its bones were fragile, delicate as pressed petals, and yet preserved with astonishing clarity. But the unsettling detail was this. The child's tiny hand rested atop a polished stone shaped like an eye, a single oval stone placed precisely where the heart would have been. And when the sand was brushed away, the stone's smooth surface appeared faintly warm, as though it had been recently held. Scientists offered explanations: thermal conductivity, residual heat from the surrounding sediment, but one archaeologist refused to touch it, whispering that it felt like the stone had been waiting to be found. There was a peculiar phenomenon as well. Every night, just after dusk, a faint vibration moved through the burial ground, so subtle that instruments barely registered it, yet strong enough to make loose grains of sand quiver. Some said it was merely temperature change, earth contracting in the coolness. Others weren't so sure. The vibration seemed too rhythmic, too deliberate, pulsing like a slow heartbeat, or like breath. Scholars still debate whether this vibration was geological, Dr. Ilan later wrote, or whether it originated from something buried deeper than the bones themselves. One fringe researcher proposed that the burial site sat atop a natural seismic pocket, a tiny shifting cavity that created periodic tremors. Another suggested the bones were arranged to amplify ground resonance, turning the grave into a sort of ancient instrument. But as days passed, even these explanations felt thin, stretched like gauze over something far stranger. There was the pattern too, that perfect radial formation around the central stone deposit. An arrangement unnervingly similar to burial circles found thousands of kilometers away in the early Jomon sites of prehistoric Japan, dated to around 2500 BCE. Of course, the two cultures were never connected, not according to the neat borders of conventional history. And yet here they were, two civilizations, separated by continents and millennia, constructing eerily similar funerary designs. Coincidence, the textbooks would say, but out in the desert night, beneath skies that held more silence than stars, coincidence felt like the weakest explanation of all. One evening, as the sun slipped behind the ridge and the chill began its slow crawl across the site, Dr. Ilan lingered alone beside the graves. Her lantern flickered in the wind, casting long shadows across the carefully arranged bones. She noticed, for the first time, that when twilight deepened, the polished stones reflected the dim light in an odd, silvery sheen. It reminded her fleetingly of the shimmering threads in the manuscript, a similar glow, a similar refusal to dull with time. She brushed the idea aside at first. Two artifacts sharing a sheen meant nothing, but something tugged at her, an instinct she had learned to trust. And so, just before the last light vanished, she tilted one of the stones, holding it toward that strange patch of starless sky. The stone brightened, only slightly, but enough to make her breath catch. Enough to make her wonder whether these stones, like the manuscript, responded to dusk itself, as though the transition between day and night awakened some quiet remembrance. When she placed the stone back onto the sand, the faint glow faded. The wind sighed softly. And far off, at the edge of the ridge, something else shifted. Not a creature, not a gust, something heavier, something deeper. From that direction, a long, low hum rose across the desert. A hum that felt achingly familiar, as though it had drifted from the manuscript's resting place, as though the two mysteries were not separate after all, but threads of the same unseen tapestry, beginning to tighten. Dr. Ilan straightened slowly, lantern trembling in her hand. She turned toward the ridge, listening. The hum grew not loud, not threatening, but steady, patient, like a distant drumbeat carried through the earth. The kind of sound that found its way into bone before it reached the ear. She stepped forward once, twice, then stopped, because beneath the sound, something else stirred. A faint tremor beneath the sand. A ripple moving through the burial ground, as though something deep below had begun to wake. The bones themselves did not move, but the air changed. The night deepened. It felt as if the earth had exhaled, and from the ridge, where darkness pooled like ink, the hum rose once more, long, resonant, inviting, all warning, as though calling them toward something the night had waited centuries to reveal. Well of reflections. The phrase drifted beneath the narrative like a ripple in still water, unspoken yet ever present, guiding the story from the burial ground toward a far older silence waiting in the desert's forgotten spine. Night clung to the limestone ridges, as though it had thickened there over centuries, following the tremor that had stirred the bones, humming through the ground in a low, patient resonance. That hum became the thread leading Dr. Yara Ilan and the small team toward a narrow ravine carved by ancient floods. The desert rarely hosted water now, but this place bore the unmistakable geometry of flow-smooth stone, rounded edges, polished walls that glimmered like old pearl under the starlight. They walked without speaking. Something in the air demanded quiet, as if raising one's voice might awaken whatever had exhaled beneath the burial ground. And though they did not yet know it, their steps were carrying them toward one of the most unsettling discoveries in the plateau's long, secretive history. It appeared first as a dark mouth in the stone, an opening framed by rock worn into a perfect oval. Natural formation, the textbooks would claim. But even in the dim lamp glow, Dr. Ilan sensed intentionality. Smoothness, too precise. Symmetry, too careful. A doorway not carved by water, but by hands with patience beyond reason. Inside, the air grew cool and still, thick with the scent of minerals long undisturbed. Their lanterns cast trembling halos that drifted along the passage's curved walls. The hum had become fainter here, but it lingered like a distant heartbeat echoing through stone. After a slow descent of 20 meters, the corridor widened into a chamber. A single pool lay at the center, perfectly round, perfectly still, perfectly dark. A well, but not one built for drawing water. This was a mirror, the well of reflections. Its surface was so smooth, so unbroken, that at first it appeared as a disk of obsidian set into the floor. Only when a loose pebble fell from someone's shoe and vanished soundlessly beneath the surface did they realize it was liquid. But what kind of liquid could reflect so flawlessly in a place with no sky? Even oil shimmered. Even pitch carried faint ripples. Not this. This surface refused disturbance, as though swallowing imperfections, as though offering its reflection not from above, but from something deeper, something waiting beneath. Dr. Ilan approached slowly. Her lantern cast a thin crescent of light across the water. But instead of reflecting her face, the pool mirrored something else. The ridge outside the cave, the burial ground, the constellationless patch of night sky that the skeletons had faced. She sucked in a breath. This was no ordinary reflection. This well was showing them another place, a view impossible from underground. She leaned closer, heart tightening, and the image shifted. The sky darkened further. Stars withdrew. Shapes moved at the edges, pale impressions, spectral outlines not quite human, not quite light. The vision flickered like a memory strained by time. One of the researchers, a soft-spoken epigrapher named Hovan, whispered, "It's reacting to us." But the reflection was not just reacting, it was watching back. The surface trembled, barely a quiver, and the researchers stepped away in quiet alarm. In her later notes, Dr. Ilan wrote, "It felt as though the well was not reflecting our world, but choosing what to show us." And indeed, scholars still debate whether this pool was a ritual object, an astronomical instrument, or something far older. Some claim it served as a ceremonial mirror to track lost constellations. Others believe it was a portal into communal memory, a device used to preserve stories in a culture without writing. But one detail refused to fit any theory. There were no tool marks on the chamber walls. None. Not a single stroke of chisel or pick or carving implement. The chamber was perfectly smooth, as if the rock had been shaped by pressure, heat, or something else, something capable of curving solid stone into flawless arcs. Even the ancient Hittites, who carved entire cities into stone, left behind unmistakable marks of their craft. But here, nothing. It was as though the chamber had grown, as though it had formed around the well, the way bone grows around marrow. When Dr. Ilan knelt again beside the pool, this time with a calmer breath, the reflection shifted once more, revealing not landscape but shapes, circular motifs, thin intersecting lines reminiscent of the pathways traced on the shimmering manuscript. A strange calm washed over her, a sense of déjà vu that seemed to straighten her spine with recognition. The manuscript, the stones from the burials, this well, all responding to dusk, all glowing with the faint silver pulse that felt less like light and more like remembrance. She reached her fingers toward the surface, pausing just millimeters above the dark mirror. The air above the water shimmered soft, like heat haze. Then the reflection began to deepen. It no longer showed sky, no longer stone. Instead, faces appeared. Not detailed, not full, just outlines, pale silhouettes framed in the dark liquid, turning slowly as though searching for something. Eyes without features, mouths without lips, forms built of memory rather than flesh. Dr. Ilan jerked back, nearly dropping her lantern. Hoven stepped forward with academic courage that thinly disguised fear. "Residual mineral hallucination," he whispered, as though naming it made it harmless. "Like reflections in mercury fumes." But the air was clean. No metallic scent, no vapor, no distortion of light. The well was showing them something it remembered. Then came the sound, soft at first, then unmistakable. A breath, from below the water, not bubbles, not shifting sediment. A human breath, slow, deliberate, waiting. The researchers backed away. Even Hoven paled. The pool exhaled again. And with that exhale, the reflection disappeared entirely, collapsing into pure darkness so absolute it seemed to swallow the lantern light around its edges. The temperature dropped. The chamber tightened, as though holding its breath along with the water. Then, a ripple, barely there, but enough to prove that something below had moved. "Step back, Doctor," Ilan whispered, voice trembling now, each word floating like a thin veil in the cold air. They retreated to the chamber's edge. Lanterns flickered. The hum from the ridge pulsed again, deeper this time, resonating up through the floor, into their bones. And the well responded. The reflection returned suddenly, not as landscape or shapes, but as a single, enormous iris. An eye, dark, ancient, unblinking. Its pupil widened slowly, as though adjusting to the lamplight. Someone choked on a gasp. Another stumbled backward. The eye blinked once slowly, heavily rippling the entire pool. Then the reflection dissolved into fragments of pale light and sank into darkness. For a long moment, no one spoke. Their breath fogged in the cold air, though moments before the chamber had been warm. The water remained still, too still, like the held breath of something aware it had been seen. In the far corner of the chamber, a faint scratching sound broke the silence. Dr. Ilan raised her lantern toward the wall, and there, on the smooth stone surface previously untouched, thin silver lines had appeared, as though drawn in an instant, as though carved by the well's reflection itself. Those lines formed a pattern eerily similar to the manuscript. Arcs, intersections, constellations not of the sky above, but of something beneath the earth. A memory map, a summons, or a warning. They could not tell. But when Dr. Ilan traced her fingertip along the fresh markings, the wall vibrated softly. A pulse, steady, patient, like the heartbeat they had sensed earlier. "It's connected," she murmured. "All of it, connected." The others nodded silently. Outside the cave, the wind had grown still unnaturally so. The desert held its breath, the hum from the ridge now steady, insistent, like a distant signal that had finally been answered. The well no longer showed reflections, but it listened with the patience of something that had waited thousands of years beneath the sand. And as they slowly ascended back toward the faint starlight, each felt the same sensation creeping along their spine. They had not discovered the well. It had allowed itself to be found, and whatever it remembered was now awake. When the first breeze touched their faces at the cave entrance, the hum from the ridge grew louder, closer, reshaping the silence of the night, as though guiding them toward the next secret, waiting in the dark, chamber where shadows speak. The thought drifted beneath the conscious mind, like a cold breeze slipping through an unlit corridor never spoken aloud, yet shaping every step of the story as the team left the well of reflections and followed the deepening hum across the plateau. The night had grown heavier now, as though the desert sky had thickened into ink. Lanterns cast only small halos, swallowed quickly by the vastness around them. Even the stars seemed hesitant, glimmering faintly as if afraid to look down at what was unfolding. The hum from the ridge, steady, patient, unsettling, guided the archaeologists like a sound remembered rather than heard. Dr. Yara Ilan walked ahead, each step sinking softly into the cooled sand. Behind her, Hovan and the others kept close, their movements careful, as though afraid to disturb the fragile thread connecting them to whatever the earth was trying to reveal. The hum grew stronger with every meter, vibrating faintly through the soles of their boots, threading itself through bone, breath, heartbeat. They reached the ridge, just as the moon withdrew behind a slow-moving band of cloud. A narrow fissure split the rock face, thin as a scar, but tall enough for a person to slip through. No wind moved within it, no scent of earth drifted out, only silence, deep and absolute, as though sound itself had been exiled from the passage. Dr. Ilan raised her lantern. The flame bent inward, a sign of a draught, except the air was still. "It's breathing," someone whispered behind her before they could stop themselves. She didn't reply. They entered. The fissure narrowed at first, forcing them forward in single file. Then, abruptly, it expanded into a passage high enough for sound to echo, yet no echo came. Their footsteps landed and vanished, swallowed instantly by walls that felt too smooth, too seamless. There were no tool marks, no cracks, no signs of natural erosion. The stone felt grown, like the chamber of the well. The hum deepened, not loud, not aggressive, but resonant like a note held by an unseen singer. They reached a point where the passage bent sharply left, then spiraled downward in a slow, graceful curve, the walls widening as if sculpted by a hand that understood the shape of silence. Lantern light shimmered across surfaces that seemed to drink illumination rather than reflect it. "This is older than the burial ground," Hovan murmured. "Older than anything on the plateau," Dr. Ilan answered. They descended for a long while, so long that they lost track of time. The twisting passage, creating a dizziness of direction. Up became down. Forward felt sideways. The hum pulsed just beneath the threshold of hearing, steady enough to become part of their breath. Then, without transition, the passage opened into a massive chamber. Their lantern flames shivered. The chamber was perfectly circular, its ceiling lost in darkness. The walls curved inward slightly, as though cradling the space. Every surface was smooth except for a ring of faint indentations carved shoulder height into the stone. 32 of them, equidistant, forming a perfect circle around the room. But the true unnerving detail was at the center, a raised dais, carved from the same seamless stone, and atop it, a formation of shadows that moved, not cast by their lanterns, not cast by anything visible. These shadows shifted slowly, swirling like smoke, yet maintaining clear edges, as though they possessed shape without substance. Some were tall, some narrow, some angular, in ways that made the eyes ache to follow. They moved with the logic of something intelligent, something ancient, circling the dais in a slow, deliberate rhythm. "Are they reflections?" Hovan whispered. "No light makes those," Dr. Ilan said softly, her voice barely a thread. And indeed, the shadows did not respond to lantern movement. When one of the researchers raised their lamp higher, the shadows did not lengthen. When another stepped closer, they did not distort. They simply continued their silent dance. This was the chamber where shadows speak. They felt it before they understood it. There was sound here hidden beneath the hum. A murmur so soft it curled just beyond perception, forming words that were not words, meanings that were not meanings. The researchers froze, breath clouding faintly in the cooling air. "What is that?" someone whispered. "Listen," Dr. Ilan murmured. They did. The murmuring grew clearer, not louder, but clearer, as though the chamber was tuning itself to their presence. The swirling shadows began to slow, drifting toward the edges of the dais. A scholar might have said the murmurs were caused by air moving through narrow vents. A geologist might have insisted the vibration was tectonic resonance, but something about the cadence felt intentional, patterned, measured, almost syllabic. Scholars still debate whether this phenomenon was acoustic pareidolia humans imposing structure on random sound, or whether the chamber was engineered to store ritual voices, releasing them when triggered by footsteps or lantern heat. But that explanation did nothing to account for what came next. The shadows paused. One elongated form detached itself from the swirling mass and drifted to the edge of the dais, facing Dr. Ilan. It stood still, as though studying her. No features, no outline except the faint suggestion of shoulders and height. And though it had no eyes, she felt it watching her. Then, slow as the movement of dusk across stone, the shadow bowed. The temperature in the chamber dropped sharply. Frost crept across the tips of their lantern glass, and from the far wall, a whisper emerged, clear, direct, unmistakable. "Return. The path." The words echoed not through the air but through their bones, vibrating along the ribs, up the spine, into the base of the skull. Instinctively, every person stepped backward. The shadows moved again faster now, spiraling around the dais as though agitated. The murmurs rose, layering into a tone that felt like warning. "Return the path. Return the path." "What path?" Hovan murmured, voice trembling. Dr. Ilan didn't answer. She was staring at the dais. There, carved into the stone surface, lay a pattern she recognized immediately. A thin, branching network, etched with the same geometry as the markings from the well of reflections. Faint silver lines glimmered, pulsing with an inner dull light, as though awakening in response to the shadow's agitation. She stepped forward before the others could stop her. Her lantern cast a trembling halo across the dais. The shadows slowed once more. "It's the same pattern," she whispered. "The same as the manuscript." The lines brightened. A soft exhale of cold air brushed her cheeks, and the hum from beneath the plateau deepened yet again. One of the researchers cried out, shattering the silence. On the far side of the chamber, one of the 32 indentations in the wall began to glow faintly. A pale, pearlescent light seeped from its edges. Then another indentation brightened, and another. One by one, the indentations illuminated in sequence, forming a continuous ring of soft luminescence around the chamber like a halo in stone. The shadows gathered at the dais center. The murmurs aligned into harmony. Then the chamber spoke again. "Follow. The breath of the earth." The lantern flames swayed violently. A tremor rolled through the ground, stronger than any earlier vibration, lifting dust in swirling patterns. The shadows dissolved into dark mist, sweeping up toward the unseen ceiling before vanishing altogether. Silence crashed into the chamber. Only the hum remained now aligned with the glowing ring, each indentation pulsing gently as though syncing with something deeper beneath the plateau. Dr. Ilan felt it. All of them did. A direction, a pull, a path opening beneath their feet. Whatever voice had spoken, whatever memory had awakened, was guiding them forward, not out of the chamber, not back to the well, but deeper, towards something older than the manuscript, older than the skeletons, older than the chamber itself. The light from the ring dimmed in a slow, deliberate rhythm. The dais shimmered faintly, its silver lines fading. Dr. Ilan exhaled, the sound barely audible in the heavy air. "The next chamber," she whispered, "is calling." Far down the curving passage beyond the chamber's far wall, the hum intensified like breath in a long, dark corridor. Slow, steady, inviting, or warning. And as they stepped toward that deeper darkness, every lantern flickered at once, as if reacting to something unseen moving in the air, something waiting, the passage that still breathes. The thought drifted like a low, unseen tide beneath their steps as Dr. Yara Ilan and her team passed beyond the chamber where shadows speak. The glow of the circular indentations faded behind them, swallowed slowly by a darkness that no longer felt empty but aware. Ahead, the hum changed, subtle but unmistakable. It no longer vibrated through the stone in a steady rhythm. Instead, it pulsed with a rise and fall so organic, so measured, that it felt like inhalation, as though the passage itself was breathing. The corridor curved downward in long, sinuous arcs, its walls narrowing until the lantern light brushed both sides at once. The stone was smoother here, so smooth it reflected the lantern glow in soft, distorted halos. The air changed too, cooler at first, then warmer, as if brushing past alternating breaths of an unseen giant sleeping deep within the earth. Hovan walked close behind Dr. Ilan, whispering, "We're going too far. This wasn't on any survey. No survey has ever mapped what lies beneath the plateau," she replied softly. "And perhaps," he murmured, "there's a reason," they continued. The deeper they went, the more the passage shifted around them, not in direction, but in texture. Smooth stone gave way to faintly ribbed surfaces, like the inside of a great fossilized shell. The ridges were subtle at first, then became more pronounced, curving in perfect parallel lines along the walls and ceiling. One of the researchers, pale under the lantern glow, reached out and traced a ridge with trembling fingertips. "It feels alive." Dr. Ilan said nothing, but she had felt it too. A faint warmth pulsed beneath the stone, rising, like blood moving through veins that had not carried life in thousands of years. And still, the passage breathed. A slow inhalation cooling the air, drawing it inward. A slow exhalation warming the air, pushing it gently past their faces. Lantern flames fluttered in the cadence of that breath, swaying forward, then back. Even their own chests began to match the rhythm unconsciously, as though their bodies were aligning with the ancient pulse of the earth. A soft gust brushed her cheek, then another. From the opposite direction, Hovan stopped. "Did you feel that?" "The breath changed direction," Dr. Ilan whispered, "as if something behind us is exhaling too." They turned, lanterns raised. The passage behind them was empty, still, silent. Yet the faint warmth lingering on their skin suggested the presence of something that had passed through only moments earlier, or something large enough that its breath reached them, even while remaining unseen. One researcher muttered, "We should go back." Another whispered, "We can't, the path is guiding us." And indeed, it was. The hum deepened as they moved forward. The ridged walls shimmered faintly, as if catching a light that did not come from their lanterns. In places, thin silver threads appeared in the grooves, almost like veins glimmering with the same iridescence they had seen in the manuscript stitching. Dr. Ilan paused to study one. The thread was delicate, nearly invisible except at certain angles. She leaned closer, and when the lantern tilted, the thread pulsed. A heartbeat, soft, steady. She recoiled not from fear, but from recognition. "The same material," she whispered. "Meteoric iron, like the manuscript stitching." Hovan frowned. "It runs through the entire corridor, like a nervous system. A ridiculous idea." Yet no one laughed. The deeper they descended, the more the corridor began to curve into impossible shapes. Spirals, loops, arcs, angles that felt disorienting, as though the space itself were warping their sense of orientation. Time seemed to stretch here. Minutes elongated. Lanterns dimmed more quickly. Shadows clung to corners where no corners existed. At one point, the passage narrowed to a slit, barely wide enough for a single person to pass through. As Dr. Ilan squeezed forward, the stone pressed close on either side, warm, vibrating faintly. It felt like ribs. She didn't say it aloud. She didn't have to. The others felt it too. When they emerged into the next widening, the hum surged upward, louder, stronger, resonating through their teeth. The lantern flames snapped with tiny bursts of light. The air thickened, and the passage moved. For the first time, they saw it clearly. A section of wall rose and fell in a slow, deliberate motion, expanding outward like a chest taking a deep breath, then contracting with a sigh that rippled through the stone. Someone gasped. Someone else whispered a prayer. "It's impossible," Hovan murmured. It's some kind of geothermal expansion pattern." "No," Dr. Ilan replied, her voice barely audible. "This isn't expansion. This is rhythm." The wall inhaled again, and a sound accompanied it, a deep, resonant hum, matching the rhythm of a sleeping creature. "Scholars still debate whether this structure is geological," Dr. Ilan wrote later, "or whether it was engineered to mimic breath so precisely that the distinction becomes irrelevant. But standing there in that living corridor, the debate felt meaningless. The earth was breathing, and something in that breath acknowledged them. The passage widened further ahead, opening into a long, sloping hall. Across its floor, faint tracks dusted with centuries of sediment lined the surface. Not footprints, nothing so humanoid. These were long, smooth impressions, curved like trails left by something vast and serpentine. Some tracks overlapped, some intertwined, forming patterns reminiscent of the manuscript's pathways. The lantern light shimmered across them, revealing a detail that made Dr. Ilan's skin prickle. The tracks glowed faintly, not bright, not vivid, but with a soft, internal luminance, as though something had moved through the passage not long ago, long after humans were expected to have walked these halls. "We're not the first living things down here," she whispered. "Or the last," someone added. A soft breeze blew from ahead, curling around their ankles. It carried no scent but a sensation, a whispering coolness that felt eerily intentional. The corridor inhaled. Lantern flames bent toward the darkness. The corridor exhaled. Flames bent back toward the entrance. And with each breath, the hum pulsed deeper, urging them forward. They walked slowly, carefully, following the glowing tracks. The hall turned sharply right, then descended in a long, ribbed curve that felt more like the inside of a colossal lung than any geological formation. At the end of the curve, the path forked, left a wide corridor sloping further downward, where warm air drifted upward in slow pulses. Right, a narrow tunnel from which cold air breathed out, carrying faint echoes like distant whispering. Before any of them could decide, the ground beneath their feet trembled. A single pulse, deep, low, like a heartbeat directly below them. Every lantern flickered. The ridges on the walls brightened for an instant, sending thin streams of silver light racing down the passage leftward. The glow faded almost immediately, but the message was unmistakable. "The Earth is telling us to go left," Hovan whispered. "Or warning us not to go right," someone murmured. Dr. Ilan stepped forward, lantern held high. She felt the heat of the downward passage brush her cheek warm, humid, like the breath of something ancient. "We follow the breath," she said softly. The chamber told us. And so they descended the left path. The warmth intensified. The hum deepened. The breathing walls narrowed around them. Finally, after a long descent, the corridor opened into a small vestibule round, domed, eerily quiet. The hum stopped. The breath stopped. The air went still. A single stone door, massive, carved with spiraling grooves, stood at the far end. Its edges were sealed with the same silver thread that lined the passage. Dr. Ilan raised her lantern to inspect the door. The spirals pulsed once, faintly, like a heartbeat. Then, from the other side of the stone, something shifted. A soft scrape, a slow drag, a whisper of movement too heavy to be human. The team froze. Dr. Ilan leaned closer, breath trembling against the cold stone. Something on the other side inhaled, a sound so low, so deep, that her bones vibrated with it. And then, a voice. Not human. Not words, just a long, resonant note, as if the darkness behind the door had finally sensed them, and recognized them, and began to wake. Pillars aligned with disappearance. The idea trailed beneath the lantern glow like a shadow slipping ahead of its owner, unspoken, yet guiding every hesitant footstep as Doctor. Yara Ilan and her team backed away from the great stone door, its spiraling grooves still trembling faintly from whatever had breathed on the other side. They retreated into the vestibule, with the caution of people crossing through the memory of danger rather than the presence of it. No one spoke for several long moments. Even the air felt unwilling to break the silence. When the hum returned, softer now, distant, almost regretful, Dr. Ilan exhaled a shaky breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "We're not opening that door," Hovan whispered. "No," she replied. "Not yet." They turned back the way they'd come, following the long-ribbed corridor upward until the warmth faded, replaced by cool, dry air. The breathing motion of the walls slowed, then ceased altogether, as though the living structure had slipped back into slumber once its unseen inhabitant withdrew. At the fork where the cold passage branched away, the team paused. The air drifting from the narrow tunnel was still chilled, still whispering with faint, half-formed echoes that felt like thoughts not meant for human minds. "We go up," Dr. Ilan decided. "Back to the surface. There's something this plateau is trying to show us in stages." "And what stage is next?" a researcher murmured. The answer waited in starlight. They re-emerged from the ridge's fissure, just as the last sliver of moon slid behind a thin veil of cloud. The desert air brushed their skin with a strangely deliberate coolness, like fingers tracing along their arms. The hum, muted now, drifted not from the ridge, but from across the plateau toward an area they had not explored. A wide plain lay ahead, quiet as a held breath, and in the center of it, arranged in a perfect geometric pattern, stood the pillars. Not like Göbekli Tepe's T-shaped monoliths, not like Hittite gateposts or Bronze Age stelae. These pillars were slender, elongated, tapering slightly toward their tops like fingers reaching for a vanishing point. 20 in total, each one carved from stone, unlike the plateau's limestone, dark, almost metallic, with a faint bluish sheen when lantern light struck at an angle. They looked as though they had been pulled from the night sky rather than carved from earth, and they were arranged in a pattern so precise it arrested the team in their tracks. 2 overlapping circles, perfectly aligned, forming a geometry associated with vanishing paths in several ancient traditions. Dr. Ilan stepped forward slowly. Hovan followed, whispering, "This isn't on any survey. How did no one see these?" "They're standing in plain sight," someone answered. "Maybe," another murmured. "They weren't always here." A fringe idea, but the kind that settles into the mind when the night feels thicker than usual. The hum pulsed again, threading between the pillars like the faint beat of a distant drum. The researchers moved among them cautiously, lanterns held high. The pillars cast unnaturally long shadows that stretched toward the center of the formation, even though the lanterns should have pushed those shadows outward. The shadows converged, focused, as though obeying a design. At the center lay a flat, circular stone, smooth, polished, etched with a pattern so faint it could only be seen at dusk, or in deep night. The pattern was familiar, interlocking arcs, thin silver lines, constellations not of the sky, but of disappearance. Star maps associated with lost travelers in ancient Saharan traditions, routes of vanished caravans traced by Nabatean priests, the silent circles, referenced in pre-Sumerian clay fragments, each connecting a point where someone or something had disappeared. Dr. Ilan knelt beside the central stone. "She's recognizing it," Hovan whispered. "I can see it on her face." "Because the manuscript has the same geometry," she murmured. "And the burial stones," someone added. "And the dais in the chamber," another said. Everything was converging. The pillars aligned not just with each other, but with every mystery they had encountered so far. Dr. Ilan lifted one of the burial stones from her satchel, the one that had glowed when tilted toward the starless patch of sky. Tonight, under the plateau's strange hush, it brightened the moment it reached the center of the pillar circle. A soft pulse, a faint warmth, then a sound, a melodic ringing, low and ethereal, vibrating across the stone platform, as if the stone were responding to the pillars, or the pillars were responding to it. Hovan knelt beside her. "It's resonating." "With what?" He swallowed. "With absence." They all felt it then, a subtle shift in the air, like a pressure drop before a storm, except without wind, without horizon disturbance. The lantern flames fluttered, not from any breeze, but as though struggling against something unseen pressing inward. Scholars still debate whether these pillars functioned as an astronomical instrument, Dr. Ilan would later write, or whether they marked places where people vanished, willingly or otherwise. One of the researchers stepped between 2 of the pillars and disappeared. Not gone, not vanished, just gone from sight for a single heartbeat before reappearing 1 step later, pale and shaking. "What happened?" Dr. Ilan rushed to him. I moved forward," he whispered, voice trembling. "But something moved with me, like a curtain of air that wasn't air. I wasn't alone on that step." He clutched his arms tightly, as though holding in warmth that had been stolen. The hum intensified. The pillars brightened faintly, and the shadows they cast, still pointing inward, began to move. Long, thin lines sliding slowly across the sand, converging toward the central stone. The same convergence pattern seen in ancient accounts of disappearance rituals, where participants were said to walk beside their shadows into the night. Of course, those accounts were myths, ritual metaphor, symbolism. Except here, symbolism was behaving with the precision of geometry. Dr. Ilan raised her lantern. Each pillar bore vertical grooves, subtle, shallow, running from top to base. She traced one with her fingertips. It vibrated faintly. Then, at a precise moment, when the hum deepened, the groove illuminated with a thin band of cold silver light. 1 pillar lit up, then 2, then 5. Then, all 20 each glowing with the same celestial shimmer as the manuscript's thread. The center stone brightened. The burial stone vibrated in Dr. Ilan's palm. And then, something appeared on the central stone. Not an object, not a figure, a shadow, a human-shaped silhouette with no source. It grew clearer, its edges sharpening, as though a person were standing directly under an invisible lantern. The team froze. The shadow turned slowly, face unseen, form unmistakable. A person, tall, thin, head tilted downward as though examining the stone platform. Dr. Ilan whispered, Is that one of the skeletons? But no skeleton stood so straight. No burial posture matched this form. The shadow raised its head, turned toward them, and extended an arm. Not beckoning, not warning, pointing toward the horizon, toward a point of perfect darkness where stars refused to appear. The same direction the skeletons had faced. Hoven's voice cracked. It wants us to go there. No, Dr. Ilan whispered, her pulse racing. It wants us to see what lies there. The pillar lights dimmed suddenly. The shadow collapsed into nothing. The burial stone went cold. And the hum, the long, patient hum, shifted direction. Now it came from the starless horizon. Far in the distance, a faint glow rose from the sand like phosphorescence waking beneath the surface. A path, long, narrow, unmistakably deliberate. The path of disappearance. Dr. Ilan exhaled. This is what the shadows meant. Return the path, Hoven murmured. Follow the breath of the earth, someone added. The pillars dimmed to darkness. Their one moment of revelation complete. The glow from the horizon brightened, and in the quiet, ancient night, the path waited, breathing, humming, alive. Something had vanished there long ago. Something wanted them to follow. Garden hidden in coordinates. The phrase lingered beneath the surface of consciousness, like a scent carried on wind, never spoken aloud, never written in any field notebook, yet sensed by everyone as doctor. Yara Ilan and her team stepped away from the pillars of disappearance and toward the dim phosphorescent glow stretching across the sand. The path was not a path in the ordinary sense. It did not cut into the sand. It did not leave impressions. It simply was a faint, bluish thread of light, trembling just above the desert floor, like moonlit breath drifting along an invisible boundary. The hum that guided them earlier now threaded softly through the night breeze, forming a cadence so gentle it felt like walking inside a lullaby. The earth itself whispered. The pillars fell behind them, shrinking into silhouettes against the starless patch of sky. Ahead, the glow curved eastward, toward a cluster of low hills, seldom documented and never excavated. The wind brushed their faces, cool and oddly fragrant, carrying the faintest trace of something green. Green, in a desert. Dr. Ilan slowed, eyes narrowing. Do you smell that? Hoven nodded. Vegetation. But there's nothing on the maps. Then it's not on the maps, she replied softly. Yet, they reached the first rise of the hills, worn smooth by millennia of sun and wind. The phosphorescent glow led them through a narrow crease between two stone shoulders, descending into a hollow where moonlight should have pooled but did not. Here, the sky above felt somehow dimmer, as though the darkness thickened just to hide whatever lay below. Their lanterns flickered as they stepped into the hollow, and then froze, because what lay at the center should not have existed. A garden, thriving, luminous. Plants, if one could call them that, rose from the sand in spiraling patterns, each leaf shimmering with faint bioluminescence. Vines coiled along the ground, glowing softly like drifting constellations. Tiny blossoms pulsed with gentle blue light, opening and closing in slow rhythms that felt uncannily like breathing. Hoven whispered, This isn't possible. Nothing grows here. Nothing can. But the garden disagreed. The air was warm, humid, carrying the scent of minerals and something faintly sweet. A soft mist drifted across the glowing leaves, evaporating as it touched their boots. Dr. Ilan knelt beside one of the spiraling plants, its stem curved in precise angles, almost mathematical. She touched a leaf with the back of her finger. It pulsed. A soft wave of light travelled up the stem, across its neighbours, and through the entire garden like a signal passing through nerves. The researchers stepped back instinctively. It reacted, someone murmured. It recognized contact, Dr. Ilan corrected. The garden was arranged in a perfect geometric layout. 3 concentric rings of vegetation, each ring composed of species that did not exist in any botanical record. Some leaves bore metallic flecks, reminiscent of the manuscript's threads. Others carried patterns so precise they resembled symbols. Symbols. Coordinates. Dr. Ilan exhaled sharply. These shapes. Look at them. She ran her lantern beam along the outer ring of vegetation. Each plant, each leaf, carried faint etchings that circled toward the center. Numbers. Angles. Astronomical notations. A map. A coded system. A garden arranged as an equation. Scholars still debate whether this formation represents an early attempt at astronomical cartography, Hovan whispered, or whether it encodes something more deliberate. Dr. Ilan pointed toward the innermost ring. There, rising from the ground like the spine of an ancient creature, stood a single stone monolith, no taller than a person, but carved with lines so delicate they shimmered as though reflecting water. Its surface was cool, its pattern familiar, the same geometry as the manuscript, the burial stones, the chamber dais, the pillars. It was all connected. She brushed away a thin layer of sand from the monolith's base. A symbol emerged, simple, elegant, a star, drawn as a single continuous spiral. That symbol had appeared once before in a fringe academic paper decades earlier, referencing an artifact found near Çatalhöyük. The author claimed it represented an early coordinate system tied to vanished ritual sites. The claim was dismissed, of course. Too speculative, too mystical. But here the symbol glowed faintly, as if awakening under Dr. Ilan's touch. Hovan leaned closer. It's a location marker, a point of intersection. Of what? Someone whispered. Of disappearances, Dr. Ilan murmured. Of paths the pillars aligned with, and of whatever the well was remembering. The garden shifted, not dramatically, not threateningly, but several blossoms turned toward them as though listening. Leaves angled inward, vines gently curled, repositioning themselves with soft rustles. The entire garden was adjusting its geometry, reacting to their presence. As if it recognized them, a low breath of wind moved through the hollow, stirring the leaves. Instead of moving randomly, the vegetation rippled in coordinated waves, like a field responding to a passing shadow. Then, the center monolith pulsed. A soft glow expanded outward, first across the inner ring, then the second, then the third, and suddenly, the garden lit up with a shimmering network of light. A map, expansive, alive. The glowing veins formed branching paths that extended beyond the garden itself, out across the sand, aligning with points on the horizon known in old desert lore as silent directions, places where travelers once vanished without trace. One researcher gasped. It's telling us where to go. No, Dr. Ilan said, breath trembling. It's telling us what remains. Because the map did not show just paths. It showed absences, points of disappearance, coordinates of loss, a network of vanished sites forming a perfect circle around the plateau. Everything vanished toward the center where they stood. The plants nearest Dr. Ilan rustled softly, their bioluminescent veins pulsing with increasing intensity. A vine brushed her boot lightly, almost with curiosity, and then recoiled, as though startled by something behind her. She turned sharply. At the edge of the hollow, silhouetted against the faint sky glow, stood a figure. Not a person, not fully. A shadow, tall, still, wrongly proportioned. Its outline wavered, as though reality struggled to keep its shape. It tilted its head not toward the team, but toward the monolith at the center of the garden. As if remembering, Hovan raised his lantern. The figure dissolved instantly like ink dispersing in water, leaving only the faint echo of the hum behind. But the garden reacted. Plants dimmed momentarily, then flared brighter in synchronized pulses. A warning, or a confirmation. Dr. Ilan steadied her breath. The shadows know this place. They've been here before. The monolith pulsed again, this time projecting a faint beam of light that pointed beyond the hollow, toward a narrow ravine in the hills. The next site, Hovan whispered. A chamber? Another well? Another disappearance marker? Dr. Ilan stepped closer to the beam. A direction, and maybe an answer, but the moment she moved toward the ravine, the garden responded with a final, unsettling gesture. All the plants, every leaf, every blossom bent in the same direction, not toward the ravine, not toward the monolith, but toward a point behind them. Slowly, cautiously, Dr. Ilan turned. At the far edge of the hollow, A faint blue doorway shimmered in the air, a vertical line of light splitting the darkness. It hummed softly, as though breathing, and as she stepped toward it, the nightly silence deepened, waiting, watching, for them to cross into whatever waited on the other side. Altar draped in forgetting. The phrase drifted beneath Dr. Yara Ilan's thoughts like an undercurrent, never spoken aloud, yet resonating in the quiet hum of the blue doorway shimmering before her. The garden's bioluminescent plants tilted toward it, as though bowing not in reverence, but in recognition. The doorway was thin as a blade of light. A vertical seam in the air, no frame, no threshold, just a trembling line where reality appeared to loosen. The desert breeze avoided it. The ground beneath it held no shadow. Even the stars overhead seemed to dim, as if refusing to reflect against its surface. Hovan stood at Dr. Ilan's side, voice barely a whisper. "Is it open?" "It's waiting," she murmured. No one else dared approach. Their lanterns flickered, flames stuttering as though resisting the doorway's presence. But the hum, low, rhythmic, coaxing, pulled her gently forward. She extended her hand, and the moment her fingertips grazed the line of blue light, the air split softly like silk parting, and the doorway widened. No burst of brightness, no dramatic flare, just a slow unfolding, as though a curtain had been drawn aside by an invisible hand. Beyond it lay a passage, narrow, stone-lined, descending at a near impossible angle. But what struck her first was the air warm, heavy, scented faintly with dust and something older than memory. The others exchanged uncertain glances. "This wasn't carved," Hovan whispered. "No," Dr. Ilan replied. It was revealed. They stepped through. The light vanished instantly behind them. Not closing, not sealing, just ceasing to exist, as if the garden outside had never been. Darkness swallowed them, broken only by the quivering halos of their lanterns. The stone walls pressed close, smooth and slightly warm. The corridor sloped steeply downward, its floor lined with shallow grooves that felt deliberate beneath their boots. Dr. Ilan ran her fingers along one of the grooves. Warm, vibrating faintly, as though carrying the echo of something that once flowed through them. The hum returned, but softer now, drawing them deeper. Minutes passed, or perhaps hours. Time slipped strangely in the passage, stretching, thinning, folding, and when they finally reached the chamber at the end, their lantern flames trembled as if stepping from wind into breath. The chamber was vast, circular, silent, and at its center stood an altar. Not a table, not a ritual slab, but a single, immense block of pale stone, rising waist-high, wrapped in what looked like layers of woven cloth. Except, it wasn't cloth. It was stone carved so delicately, so impossibly thin, that it fell over the altar's edges like soft fabric. Folds, creases, the hint of frayed edges, all sculpted from limestone so fine it seemed to bend in the air. An altar draped in forgetting. No carvings, no inscriptions, no symbols, except for one faint imprint in the center, shallow, circular, no larger than a human hand, as though something once rested there for centuries, pressing its memory into the stone. Dr. Ilan set her lantern on the altar's edge. Immediately, the stone cloth absorbed the light. Not reflecting, absorbing. Within seconds, the draped folds glowed faintly from within, as if awakening. A soft pulse travelled across the altar's surface. Hovan stepped back. "What is this?" "A repository," she murmured. "Something meant to hold memory. But it's empty." "No," she whispered. It was emptied. The air in the chamber shifted soft, cold, brushing her neck like the whisper of something passing close. The lantern flame flickered sideways. Someone behind her muttered, "We're not alone down here." Indeed, the shadows around the altar seemed thicker, gathering in the corners of the chamber. The stone walls curved gently inward, forming acoustics that felt strange in their precision, too perfect, like a room designed to capture sound and hide it. Dr. Ilan leaned closer to the altar. The faint imprint in the center caught her eye again, the shape of something circular, slightly concave, as though a bowl or disc had once fit perfectly into the indentation. "Something was taken," she whispered. "Or hidden elsewhere," Hovan offered. She traced the imprint's edge. Her fingertips tingled instantly cold at first, then warm like touching a memory. And then she heard it. A faint murmur, soft, wordless, like voices below the threshold of sound. She jerked her hand back. "What happened?" The stone spoke. The team exchanged uneasy glances. Hovan swallowed hard. You mean you heard something? Yes. What did it say? It wasn't language. It was... She hesitated. A sensation. Like forgetting. The altar seemed to pulse brighter for a moment, as if acknowledging her words. And then the chamber responded. Lines, thin, silver, luminescent, began to emerge on the walls. Not carved, not painted. They surfaced slowly, rising from the stone as though lifted from long dormant memory. The lines formed a circular map, not of terrain, not of sky, but of absence. Points where things once existed and no longer did. Vanished settlements, lost rituals, erased histories, a cartography of forgetting. Hovan stepped closer, tracing one of the glowing points with his eyes. These correspond to the disappearance coordinates in the garden. And the pillar circle, another added. And the burial arrangement, Dr. Ilan whispered. Everything interconnected, everything feeding into the center. The center, where they now stood. The altar pulsed again brighter, casting a faint silver glow across the chamber. The walls shimmered, the air thickened, and shadows shifted. Not many, just one. At the edge of the chamber, a single figure formed. Not fully, not clearly, but in the same ghost-like silhouette they'd seen among the pillars. Tall, thin, head tilted. It did not move, but its presence altered the air. The team froze. Breath held, lanterns trembling. The figure raised its arm. Slowly, deliberately. Not pointing outward this time, pointing toward the center of the altar. Toward the imprint. Dr. Ilan felt her pulse thud softly in her ears. It wants us to place something there, she whispered. But what? The shadow tilted its head further, gesture insistently slow, as though urging them to remember something they had not yet learned. Hovan whispered. The burial stone. Dr. Ilan reached into her satchel and withdrew the polished, teardrop-shaped stone they had taken from the grave circle. The one that responded to dusk, that glowed, that pulsed in the pillar circle. When she held it above the indentation, the stone warmed in her palm. The shadow leaned forward, barely perceptible, like a flicker of smoke. She placed the stone onto the imprint. The chamber inhaled. A long, low breath swept through the room. The stone sank slightly into the indentation, not physically, but in its luminosity, as though merging with the altar. The draping stone folds brightened, glowing like pale fabric catching moonlight. And then, a sound rose from the altar's depths. Not a hum, not a whisper. A low, melodic resonance. The sound of something remembering itself. The glowing lines on the walls expanded, branching outward like a living map, revealing new coordinates, new paths, new patterns. And at the center of the map, a circle, a symbol, a location. Hovan leaned in. What is that place? Dr. Ilan's breath shook. It's beneath us. The map was showing something hidden deeper still. A chamber, a vault, a memory sealed away long before the desert swallowed the world above. But the moment her eyes fixed on the symbol, the shadow figure reacted. It dissolved, not fading, dissolving into streaks of black that sank into the stone floor like liquid darkness. The altar dimmed. The resonance ceased, and a new sound emerged. A rumble, soft at first, then growing. The stone wall behind the altar split vertically, silently, revealing another passage. Narrow, descending, cold. Dr. Ilan lifted her lantern. Beyond the new passage, something gleamed faintly. A metallic shimmer reflecting deep in the dark. A doorway, not of stone, not of the plateau. A doorway made of the same meteoritic material as the manuscript thread. Waiting, breathing, remembering. The altar dimmed completely. The chamber fell still, and the passage beyond whispered with a cold, ancient invitation, the mark that refuses translation. The thought drifted at the edge of Dr. Yara Ilan's awareness as she stepped toward the newly revealed passage, an intuition, a whisper, a pulse of warning, folded into the cool air, emerging from the dark. Behind her, the altar, draped in forgetting, dimmed to its soft stone slumber, as though relieved to have passed its burden onward. Ahead waited a narrow descent, cold, metallic, quiet. The metallic shimmer they'd glimpsed from the chamber's far edge grew clearer as they approached. It was not a trick of lantern light, nor mineral reflection, nor the sheen of worn stone. This was something else, something forged or formed from matter not native to the plateau. Dr. Ilan raised her lantern toward the passage. The walls here were no longer the smooth, grown limestone of the upper chambers. They were lined with thin, vertical striations, almost like the ribbing of some ancient structure, but metallic, cool to the touch, humming faintly beneath her fingertips. A subtle vibration, alive, awake. "Same material as the manuscript thread," she whispered. Hovan nodded, voice thin. "And the burial stones. And the pillars. It's all the same alloy. Alloy. But no ancient culture worked meteoritic iron into such fine structures. No smelting technique known to archaeology could have produced this texture, light, flexible, almost breathing. Modern metallurgy couldn't replicate it. Even the best steel did not hum. The passage sloped downward in a slow spiral, wide enough for only 2 people at a time. Their lantern halos danced across the ribbed walls, creating shifting, trembling shadows that elongated with every step. The air grew colder, not the natural cold of deep caverns, but a chill that felt suspended, deliberate. Halfway down, Dr. Ilan stopped abruptly. Etched into the metallic wall, thin, shallow, almost invisible, was a symbol. Circular, interwoven arcs. A shape that pretended to be geometric but resisted the eye the longer one stared. Hovan stepped forward. "Is it writing?" "No," Dr. Ilan whispered. "It's older than writing." The symbol seemed to move as the lantern flickered. Not literally, just in the way certain illusions warp when light shifts. But the effect was enough to make her heart thud once against her ribs. "Is it like the script on the manuscript?" a researcher asked. She shook her head. "The manuscript had pathways. This has intent." She lifted the lantern closer, studying every curve, every loop, every interlocking arc, and the longer she looked, the more the symbol refused to settle into a single, stable shape. Lines overlapped in ways that defied normal geometry. Some parts seemed concave at one angle, convex at another. The symbol was simple in its form, but impossible in its logic. "Is it a coordinate?" Hovan asked softly. "A warning?" another whispered. "Or given the garden's map a location they were not supposed to find?" "Scholars still debate whether this mark represents a pre-linguistic symbol," Dr. Ilan murmured, "or whether ancient cultures recorded memory in ways we no longer understand." She reached out and traced the symbol lightly. The metal responded instantly, not with heat, not with vibration, with sound. A soft, trembling tone like the faint ringing of a bowl struck by a fingertip echoed through the passage. The ribs in the wall shivered, sending ripples of resonant energy down the corridor, and the symbol brightened, only slightly, but unmistakably. A pale blue glow seeped into its lines, illuminating the arcs in a pattern that did not match any written system on Earth. It pulsed once, slowly, then dimmed again. But the hum that had guided them all night shifted in response. No longer behind them, now in front, the mark had acknowledged them. The passage deepened its spiral. The air thickened. The metallic hum steadied. The team moved on. Finally, after a long descent, the corridor opened into a vaulted chamber. Their lanterns trembled. Someone exhaled a startled breath. Hovan muttered a soft curse. At the center of the chamber stood the doorway. Not stone, not metal, not wood. A surface that shimmered like heated air, tall as 2 people, framed by a thin metallic ring of the same meteoritic alloy. The doorway flickered, its interior opaque, not empty space, but something with depth, yet no physical boundary. And directly above it, etched into the vaulted ceiling, was the mark. The same mark that refuses translation, larger this time, and glowing faintly, as if written in light rather than carved. Dr. Ilan felt a tremor in her chest. "It's a boundary marker. A portal? No. A memory." The walls of the chamber, metallic, ribbed, warm, carried faint carvings as well. She raised her lantern. Symbols spiraled across the metal, fading in and out of visibility like breath fogging on glass. Some resembled constellations. Others resembled faces. Others resembled limbs or hands extended toward the doorway. Hands, frozen mid-reach. Hands recorded at the moment of knowing. The same motif repeated in the burial circle, in the garden's geometry, in the altar's echo. Hands reaching, remembering, trying to grasp something unseen. One researcher whispered, "Were the ancient people trying to open this?" Hovan shook his head. "No, they were trying to close it." Dr. Ilan stepped forward. The doorway flickered. A ripple travelled through its surface like wind passing over water. A faint silhouette appeared. A figure, not fully formed, not entirely human, but with enough familiar proportions to make the heart lurch. Tall, narrow, neck slightly elongated, arms thin and gently curved. The figure moved slowly, as though walking through thick liquid, then stopped, tilted its head. It was looking at them. The chamber air grew colder. Lantern flames shrank. The hum behind the walls tightened. The figure raised its hand. Dr. Ilan held her breath. It placed its palm long, thin, wrong against the inside of the shimmering surface. The surface rippled, as though inviting her to mirror it. "No," Hovan whispered. "Don't." But something else happened. A symbol appeared, right where its hand touched. The mark that refuses translation, glowing, sharper now, aligned precisely with the figure's palm. The mark on the ceiling brightened in response. The walls glowed faintly with the same impossible geometry, and a voice, soft, layered, neither human nor echo, slid through the chamber. "Remember." Every lantern extinguished at once. Darkness fell heavy, complete, absolute. The hum surged. A low vibration trembled through the floor. Something deep beneath them stirred. Dr. Ilan's heartbeat thudded in her ears. She reached blindly for her lantern. Her hand brushed metal, cold but not the lantern. The wall? No. Too smooth, too warm. The ribs in the wall began to pulse. Then, with a slow, reluctant flicker, the lanterns reignited, dim, trembling. The figure was gone. But on the floor directly before the shimmering doorway lay something new. A disc. Metallic. Thin, pale silver, like the meteor thread. Inscribed with the same mark, but this time, the lines held steady, not shifting or warping. A translation key? A key? Dr. Ilan knelt, touching the disc lightly. It warmed instantly, recognizing her. The doorway shimmered. The mark on the ceiling flared. The hum thickened. Hovan whispered, "We have to step back." But the disc pulsed again, and the doorway exhaled. A deep, slow breath, warming the air, pushing their lantern flames outward, pulling their shadows forward like drawn fabric, as if the chamber itself, to expected them, to step inside. The mark that refuses translation glowed more brightly, no longer refusing, beginning to reveal, but only if they crossed the threshold. Dr. Ilan lifted the disc. The hum fell silent. The doorway darkened into absolute stillness, and something in the floor beneath their feet shifted, a deep, ancient mechanism, waking after countless lifetimes. The chamber inhaled, and the corridor behind them sealed. With a soft, whispering, click, no turning back, only forward, toward the mark, toward the doorway, toward whatever waited beyond the breath of the earth. Vault, where time folded. The phrase drifted through Dr. Yara Ilan's mind like a memory spoken in a dream, a whisper carried on ancient breath, detectable only in the quietest moments, as the corridor sealed behind them with that soft, irreversible click. She felt the weight of the earth settle over the team, not oppressive, not hostile, more like a patient hand resting gently upon their shoulders, urging them forward. The chamber with the shimmering doorway stood in a hush so profound that even their breathing sounded intrusive. Dr. Ilan tightened her grip on the metallic disc light, warm, humming faintly like a sleeping creature. Before her, the doorway waited, still, silent, opaque, a membrane of dark light, neither liquid nor air, but something that seemed to hold density without shape. The mark that refuses translation glowed faintly on the ceiling above it, matching the thin lines etched across the disc now pulsing in her hand. Hovan swallowed behind her. "Whatever that is, it's expecting a response, and we're the ones meant to give it," she murmured. She stepped closer. The doorway brightened at the edges, the surface rippling outward like a thin sheet of ink disturbed by breath. Dr. Ilan held the disc toward it. Instantly, the chamber responded. The walls hummed deep, resonant as though vibrating in recognition. The ribbed metal glowed in long pulses. The mark above them intensified, shedding soft blue light that bathed the chamber in an otherworldly glow. And the doorway shifted. The dark light thinned, pulled back, revealing depth, not space, not another room, but movement. Faint at first, tiny swirling lights drifting like dust motes caught in slow water. Then clearer shapes forming and collapsing like memories trying to become real. Hovan whispered, "Is that time?" "It's memory, Doctor," Ilan said, voice low, collected, preserved, waiting. Historians had once theorized quietly, cautiously, that certain ancient structures acted not as shelters or shrines, but as mnemonic chambers, designed to imprint and transmit communal memory through symbols, rituals, even architectural acoustics. But this was something different, more literal, a vault of memory. A vault where time itself might bend, or soften, or spiral. Dr. Elan pressed the disc forward. It touched the surface. The doorway inhaled. A deep, slow intake of energy that pulled their lantern flames toward it, bending their shadows across the stone floor. Then, in a single, silent pulse, the membrane dissolved into a clear, glass-like surface, revealing the vault. They stepped through. The air shifted around them cool, flowing as though every molecule had been arranged by meticulous design. The lantern flames steadied instantly, no longer flickering. The hum grew softer, more focused, like breath withheld. The vault was vast, far larger than the chamber they had left. Its ceiling curved into a dome so high it disappeared into darkness. And the walls were alive, not alive in the biological sense. Alive in the way memory is alive. Across the curved metal surfaces, images flowed faint, ghostly, shifting. Scenes emerging from darkness. Faces forming and dissolving. Structures rising and falling. Patterns of movement etched in light. Not drawings, not carvings. Something in between. Temporal echoes. The vault breathed memory. Hovan took a step forward, lantern trembling. This can't be human. Look, Doctor, Elan whispered. The images respond to motion. She raised her hand. Instantly, the nearest wall brightened. A swirl of light collapsed into a single scene. A settlement of circular dwellings, ancient, older than any known Neolithic site. People moved among them, their figures blurred, elongated. They carried objects shaped like the burial stones. Some placed their hands over their eyes, others toward the sky. Then, the image rippled. The dwellings dissolved. A new scene formed. Tall pillars arranged in precise geometry, the same formation they had seen on the plateau. Only now they could see the original builders. Thin figures with long limbs, moving in slow, reverent gestures. Then, the image collapsed again. Another scene emerged. The chamber where shadows speak, newly carved, newly glowing, with no dust or decay. Shadows moved around the dais, but these shadows were not spectral. They were people. Cloaked figures performing rituals with slow, looping motions, their hands tracing the mark that refuses translation across the floor. "By the gods!" someone whispered behind her. The vault responded to voice. The images swirled. A new vision emerged. A stone platform, an altar, but not draped in forgetting. Still whole, still inhabited. An object rested at its center, circular, metallic, the very disc Dr. Elan held in her hand. The vault dimmed suddenly, as though realizing they recognized the object. Then the scene flickered, transforming into something darker. A long procession of figures winding into the plateau's depths, hands raised in the gesture from the burials, faces lowered. At the front of the procession, a tall silhouette, not human, similar to the shadow they had seen. Its elongated head bowed, its arms carrying something wrapped in pale cloth. The procession entered a cavern. The vault shimmered. The image destabilized. Then, a burst of light, followed by darkness, followed by stillness. The vault dimmed. The hum quieted. The lantern flames steadied. "What was that?" Hovan whispered. "It looked like—" Dr. Elan hesitated. A ceiling. A burial? No. A vaulting. A preservation. Like they were hiding something. "And what happened after?" someone asked. Dr. Elan scanned the next ripple of images. Scenes flickered faster now, more chaotic. Structures collapsing. Figures fleeing. Light dissolving into darkness. And then, emptiness. As though something erased not just people, not just memory, but time itself. The vault's hum deepened a low, mournful vibration. Then the far wall brightened. A single symbol appeared, glowing with soft silver light, the mark that refuses translation. But now it was stable, clear. Still, the disc in her hand responded, warming, pulsing, aligning its internal lines to match the wall. "It's a key," she whispered. "A key to read the vault." She lifted the disc toward the glowing symbol. The vault reacted immediately. Every wall illuminated. Every rib glowed. Every temporal echo stilled in place. Then, the dome above them brightened. A vast circular map unfurled across its surface. A map not of geography, nor stars, nor ritual geometry. A map of time. 3 rings. The first events preserved, the second events forgotten, the third events erased. And what is the center? Hovan asked. Dr. Ilan stepped beneath the dome, lantern trembling. The center of the map glowed, a single point, a location, directly beneath the plateau, beneath the garden, beneath the pillars, beneath the burial circle, beneath the well, beneath the vault. A chamber, hidden deeper still. A chamber marked not with a symbol, but with a name. Not human, not linguistic. A sound, a low, resonant tone, the vault emitted the moment she focused on the center. A note that vibrated in her bones, deep and heavy. The same note they heard behind the sealed stone door. Whatever is buried down there, Dr. Ilan whispered, is the reason these chambers exist. And the reason those people vanished, Hovan added. And the reason the shadows follow us? Someone murmured. The vault dimmed again slowly, gently, as though guiding them toward the next threshold. Dr. Ilan stepped back from the dome. The shimmering doorway behind them flickered once, as if reminding them there was no return. And at the far end of the vault, a new passage opened, a soft seam of silver light spreading in the metallic wall, revealing a descent even deeper than before. A breath, slow, warm, drifted up from the darkness. The vault exhaled, and something below inhaled, waiting. Hands frozen in the act of knowing. The phrase wove itself through Dr. Yara Ilan's thoughts like a soft thread pulled from the fabric of a forgotten dream. Subtle, persistent, trembling with meaning she could not yet reach. As the seam of silver light peeled open at the far end of the vault, revealing a descent steep and cold, she felt her breath catch. Not in fear, in recognition, as though she had been here before, as though every step she had taken from the burial ground to the well, from the garden to the altar, had been guiding her toward this precise point, deep beneath the desert, where the earth remembered what the world above had forgotten. The vault walls glowed faintly behind them, dimming as if exhaling into slumber. The new passage inhaled. Warmth drifted upward from the darkness, carrying with it a faint mineral scent, and something sharper, something metallic, electric, almost like lightning caught in stillness. Their lantern flames bent toward the descent. Dr. Ilan tightened her grip on the translation disc, now faintly glowing against her palm, lines shifting as though sensing the chamber ahead. Hovan touched her shoulder. Before we go, look. He pointed toward the vault walls. The images, the temporal echoes had changed. The ghostly scenes no longer flickered with past settlements or shadowed rituals. Now they showed a single repeating motif. Hands. Dozens. Hundreds. Outstretched. Frozen mid-gesture. Some pressed to stone. Some reaching upward. Some folded across chests. Some splayed open in a gesture that looked almost like surrender. Or revelation. Hands frozen in the act of knowing. The vault dimmed once more almost shyly, leaving only that final, haunting image glowing faintly before everything went dark. The descent waited. They stepped forward. The silver seam closed behind them with a soft sigh, sealing them away from the memory vault and plunging them into a narrow tunnel lined with smooth, warm metal. Their lanterns shivered, casting trembling halos along the ribbed walls. But the ribs here were different. No longer structural, no longer metallic. These ribs were carved, each one shaped like a human forearm. Subtle, graceful, ending in an open hand pressed against the wall. Dr. Ilan stopped cold. Hands, hundreds of them, embedded into the corridor walls as though melting into the metal mid-touch. The team fell silent, the imagery too uncanny to parse. Hovan whispered, "Is this part of the architecture?" "No," Dr. Ilan murmured. "This is intentional, ritualistic. But what ritual involves carving hundreds of arms into a corridor?" "The same ritual the vault showed us," she whispered. "These were not carvings. These were imprints, gestures preserved by intention, not stone. Hands frozen in the act of knowing." Scholars still debate whether these gestures represented a protoscript, a pre-linguistic symbolic system used to transmit knowledge physically rather than verbally, a kind of kinetic memory. If that theory had seemed fringe before, it felt painfully relevant now. As they descended deeper, the hands changed. At first, the gestures were open, gentle palms upward, fingers relaxed. Then gradually, they shifted. Palms turned inward, fingers tensed, forearms pressed more urgently into the wall. A progression of emotion carved in metal. Curiosity, recognition, fear, reverence, warning. What were they reaching for? Someone whispered. The corridor itself answered. The temperature dropped sharply. Lantern flames pulled inward, bowing like supplicants. A low sound hummed from the depths, steady, resonant, patient. The hum of the thing behind the sealed stone door. The hum of the center of the vault's time map. The hum of the memory that refused to fade. The hum of the chamber beneath everything. They reached a landing. The tunnel widened into a circular antechamber, where the lantern light dimmed inexplicably as though smothered. The walls glowed faintly, not with light, but with a subtle radiance like moonlit bone. And here, the hands changed again, no longer pressed to the wall, no longer reaching. Now they pointed, all of them, hundreds of hands, frozen mid-gesture, fingers extended, pointed toward a single opening at the far side of the chamber, a doorway, perfectly round, carved from stone so dark it consumed the lantern light, a black aperture in the world. Dr. Ilan's breath trembled. "They're showing the way," she whispered. "No," Hovan murmured. "They're warning us which way not to go." But the disc in Dr. Ilan's hand warmed, almost urgently, glowing with patterns she had not seen before. Concentric rings collapsing inward, merging into a single narrow thread. Toward the doorway, the room inhaled. A soft gust swept across the stone, brushing dust patterns into spirals that pointed, again, toward the aperture. Dr. Ilan stepped forward. The moment her foot crossed the threshold, the entire chamber reacted. The hands on the walls brightened with a pale silver glow, not uniformly, but selectively. Only the hands whose fingers pointed directly at Dr. Ilan lit up, forming a faint ring of illumination around the edges of the chamber, guiding her into the aperture. It felt like stepping into the final breath of something vast. The interior was silent, still, cold, the walls smooth as obsidian, but warm to the touch. The floor angled downward, long, gentle, deliberate. Lantern light stretched impossibly far, swallowed and returned in soft pulses, as if the chamber breathed with her. Then, a whisper, not from behind, not from ahead, from everywhere, a layered murmur, soft as the shifting of dust, speaking no words but carrying unmistakable intention. The same sensation from the altar, from the well, from the first shadow. Something was remembering her. She descended deeper. The chamber curved downward in a long spiral, a vast, ribbed throat, swallowing them inch by inch. The walls shifted color black to deep blue, blue to metallic silver, silver to something shimmering like memory made solid. Then the spiral opened, and they saw it. A vast, spherical chamber, silent, hollow, expansive enough that their lanterns could not find its far edge. But in its center, something stood, a column of silver light, thin, vertical, vibrating, and around it, suspended in the air, hovered dozens of shapes. Hands, not carved, not stone, not metal, hands made of light and shadow both, floating, moving slowly, forming patterns, gestures, symbols. A language, a conversation, the act of knowing. Dr. Ilan stepped forward, breath trembling. The floating hands shifted, turning toward her, aligning their fingers in a unified gesture. A pointed arch, a spiral, a beckoning. The column of light brightened, the hum deepened, and for the first time, the hands spoke. Not in sound, but in movement, a gesture she recognized instantly. The same gesture etched in the burial site, the same gesture carved in the well chamber, the same gesture pressed into the altar, the same gesture performed by the procession in the vault's memory, a gesture meaning, "We are waiting." Dr. Ilan raised her own hand, slowly, deliberately, mimicking the gesture. The floating hands froze. The chamber held its breath. The column of light swelled, bright, warm, revealing a silhouette at its center, a figure, still forming, still remembering itself. Something, or someone, long forgotten by time, waiting to return, platform hovering above its purpose. The thought drifted like a soft veil behind Dr. Yara Ilan's eyes as she stared into the immense spherical chamber, its hollow silence trembling with the glow of floating hands and the rising silhouette at the center of the light column. She felt the weight of the moment not as fear, but as recognition, as though she had finally reached the room the plateau had been dreaming her toward. The figure within the column was still taking form edges, flickering between presence and light, shape and memory. Each time it brightened, the floating hands shifted, aligning themselves around the column in a new configuration. Not random, not decorative. Language, a syntax built of gesture, movement, position. And at the center of this living grammar, the figure waited, not breathing, not watching, simply waiting, the same way the manuscript had waited to be touched by dusk, the way the burial stones had waited for the right angle of light, the way the altar had waited for the stone to return. All of it had been preparing for this. Dr. Ilan stepped forward, her lantern trembling with each breath. The floating hands parted in a slow ripple, creating a narrow path toward the column. Hovan whispered, "This feels like crossing into a story we were never meant to read, or one we were always meant to finish," she murmured. They followed the path. The air grew warm near the column, warmer than the vault, warmer than any subterranean chamber. The metallic floor beneath them vibrated in subtle pulses. Each pulse matched the movement of the light around the figure. A rhythm, a heartbeat, but it wasn't human. The floating hands expanded outward, their gestures shifting into a new sequence. This time, Dr. Ilan understood the pattern even before she consciously recognized it. She had seen it in the burial arrangement, in the angles of the garden's vines, in the pillars' converging shadows. A directional sequence, a rotation, a pivot point. The figure inside the column solidified further. Long limbs, elongated neck, tall, slender form, fingers longer than any human hand, yet not monstrous, not grotesque, more elegant, as though built for a kind of movement or precision no human body was suited for. Who were they? Someone whispered. The column responded. Light flared upward, illuminating the chamber's far walls for the first time. And there, at the chamber's perimeter, a structure hovered, a perfect circle of stone slabs, each one suspended a few centimeters above the floor, not touching, not supported, simply hovering in place, as though held aloft by memory alone. 20 slabs, equally spaced, aligned with absolute mathematical precision. Dr. Ilan felt her heart stutter. This was the platform hovering above its purpose, once depicted in the vault's echoes, now revealed in its true form, and each slab bore a carved depression, a shallow groove matching the exact shape of the burial stones they had found on the plateau. Hovan inhaled sharply. "These are sockets for the stones," Dr. Ilan whispered. "Each slab is waiting for one." One stone lay on the altar. 10 had been found in the burial circle. Others had been scattered or lost, but the pattern was undeniable. 20 stones, 20 slabs, one complete mechanism. "What happens when all the stones are placed?" someone asked. No one answered, because the floating hands shifted again, gesturing upward now toward the chamber's unseen ceiling. The light brightened, the figure deepened into clarity, and the platform began to rotate, slowly at first, barely perceptible, then with growing steadiness. Lantern light danced across the slabs as they turned in silent unity. No grinding, no friction, no sound except the soft hum rising from the chamber floor. Dr. Ilan's pulse quickened. "It's responding to the disc," she whispered, lifting the translation key in her hand. The figure inside the column lifted its own hand, thin, graceful, and mirrored her gesture precisely. The light rippled, the platform shifted again, and the air inside the chamber thickened, as though saturated with memory. A researcher stepped forward, voice trembling. "If this is a mechanism, maybe it's designed to—" He never finished, because the figure finally stepped out of the column, not fully, not completely, just a single step, its foot touching the floor without sound, its body half-formed, half-light, as though woven from the memory of itself. Every floating hand froze in place. The platform stopped rotating. The hum collapsed into a single deep note, a note Dr. Ilan recognized. The same note that had vibrated behind the sealed stone door, the same note at the center of the vault's time map, the same note the plateau had exhaled the night the manuscript was uncovered, time-folded, not metaphorically. Literally, the air around the figure shimmered inward, collapsing into itself like fabric drawn by invisible hands. The chamber distorted, light bending, walls curving, shadows elongating. Hovan grabbed her arm. "The space is warping, look." The floating hands had split, half drifted toward the figure, half drifted toward Dr. Ilan, and in their movements she could see the meaning, bridge, memory, return, Return what? She whispered. The figure raised its hand, slowly, deliberately, pointing toward the hovering platform, then to the stones, then to her. The disc in her palm grew warm enough to sting. She gasped, dropping it to the floor, but before it hit, it hovered, caught in a thin pulse of light that rose from the ground like a thread. The hovering disc rotated, aligning its glowing markings with the figure's gesture, and a new symbol formed in the air between them. A spiral, a circle, a broken ring. Recognition slammed through her. A missing piece, she whispered. They sealed something away. And now it's opening, Hovan said softly. The figure stepped closer, no longer flickering, no longer half-formed. Its face was smooth, unreadable. No eyes, no mouth. Yet she felt its attention. Not threatening, not pleading, inviting. As though offering the next piece of the story. She raised her hand again. The figure mirrored her. The floating hands ignited in bright silver light. The platform spun faster. The chamber pulsed with ancient rhythm. And then, a single slab detached from the platform. It floated toward her, glowing softly. On its surface lay a depression identical to the one she had filled at the altar. Hovan whispered, "It wants another stone." But they had none. Except, her eyes widened. She reached into her satchel. Amid her notebooks and brushes lay a small object she had nearly forgotten. A fragment found days earlier near the burial circle, too smooth to be natural, too metallic to be stone. She had assumed it belonged to a tool. Now she saw the truth. It glowed faintly in the chamber light. Its shape, small, curved, almost teardrop-like, matched the depression on the hovering slab. A missing stone, or a fragment of one. Her breath trembled. Slowly, she placed the fragment into the slab. The slab brightened. The platform shuddered. The floating hands spiraled toward the ceiling. The figure stepped backward into the column of light, as if returning to its origin. A deep vibration rolled through the chamber. Not violent, not destructive, resolute. A sound of something unlocking beneath their feet, deep below the sphere, deeper than the vaults, deeper than the chambers, deeper than memory. The figure raised its hand one final time, a gesture meaning, follow. The floor beneath the platform slid open, smooth, silent, revealing a stairway descending into darkness so complete the lantern light refused to enter. A stairway that had been hidden until the platform rotated into alignment. A stairway accessible only by completing the first movement of the mechanism. The pathway of the vanished, the heart of the plateau. The chamber inhaled. A warm gust drifted from below. Waiting, Hovan whispered. "What is down there?" Dr. Ilan answered, without hesitation. The thing time tried to forget. She lifted her lantern. It flickered once, twice, then steadied. She stepped downward. The figure in the light column dissolved like dust in reverse, pulled upward into memory. The floating hands dimmed. The platform stilled. The hum settled into a low, pulsing heartbeat. And as the team followed her down into the stairwell, the darkness embraced their lantern glow with unusual softness, like something below had been waiting a very, very long time. The chronicle in broken clay. The phrase drifted at the base of Dr. Yara Ilan's thoughts as she descended the newly revealed stairway, descending into a darkness so complete it seemed to swallow the lantern glow before it had a chance to breathe. Each step carried the weight of centuries, dust shifting softly beneath their boots as if acknowledging their arrival. The hum that had followed them through chambers, corridors, wells and vaults softened now into something almost like a pulse. Not threatening, not welcoming. Simply present a quiet reminder that beneath this desert plateau, something ancient was remembering itself. The stairway corkscrewed tightly at first, its walls ribbed with the same metallic arcs they had seen above. Then, as if relaxing, it broadened into a spiral descent carved from black stone. The walls here were different, pocked with faint impressions, thin scratches, and shallow indentations. Like writing, but not writing. The lantern glow brushed over the marks, revealing gestures etched in sweeping curves, spirals, and angled strokes. Some overlapped as if layers upon layers of memory had been pressed into the stone, like chalk written over by new hands across centuries. Hovan touched one of the curves. "It looks..." hurried. "No, Doctor," Ilan whispered. "It looks interrupted. Half-finished lines. Abrupt endings. Symbols scratched deeper at their terminal points, as though the hands that carved them had been snatched away mid-motion. The chronicle, in broken clay. Though these walls were stone, the impression felt like clay tablets, ancient messages, once baked in fire, now fragmented, scattered. She knew clay traditions intimately. She had held tablets from Uruk, dated to 3,300 BCE worlds, preserved in wedges of cuneiform. She had seen tablets broken in war, in chaos, and sometimes more chillingly in ceremony. But these markings didn't break through erosion, collapse, or careless handling. These were broken the moment they were made. These walls are a chronicle, she murmured. Not written, embedded. Memory inscribed through gesture. By who? Someone whispered. Or what? Another muttered. The stairway ended abruptly. A vast cavern opened before them, its ceiling lost in darkness, its breadth so wide the lanterns could not touch the far walls. The ground underfoot had been flattened intentionally, smoothed into a long rectangular floor that stretched nearly the length of a football field. And at the far centre of the cavern stood the remains of an ancient archive. Shattered objects lay scattered across the smooth stone in deliberate rows. Rows that once might have held shelves, pedestals, or lecterns. The arrangement had the same sacred symmetry seen in early archives from the Temple of Enki at Eridu, or the proto-libraries of the Hittite capital at Hattusa. But these objects were not clay tablets. Or rather they were, but not in any form known to archaeology. Hundreds of fragmented discs lay across the floor, thin, curved, dull silver or pale grey clay, some cracked, some shattered, each covered in etched gestures, arcing lines, spirals, interlocking loops, not textual, rhythmic, like a score written for hands instead of voice. Dr. Ilan knelt beside one, brushing dust from its surface. It's a gesture script, she whispered. Instructional, like choreography. A memory language. Hovan exhaled sharply. What could require hundreds of discs of instructions? The answer waited in the center of the cavern. A single, intact pedestal, tall, columnar, smooth, made not of stone, but of the same meteoritic alloy they had seen in the vault's ribs. And atop it, a clay disc, whole, unbroken, untouched by time. Dr. Ilan approached slowly. The disc glowed faintly, as though warmed by the lantern's breath. Symbols spiraled across its surface in tightening circles. Gesture marks so precise they looked carved by machinery. She reached forward. The moment her fingertips brushed the surface, the cavern inhaled. A wave of air, warm, dense, ancient, swept outward in a silent pulse. The lantern flames collapsed to brief blue sparks before recovering. Dust spiraled upward, illuminated in thin beams of sudden white light emerging from the cavern ceiling. Something above them had awakened. Hovan steadied himself against the pedestal. What did you do? Nothing, she whispered. It recognized us. The clay disc brightened. The etched gestures began to shift. Not physically, but through light, as though the symbols rearranged themselves across the surface. A pattern formed. A sequence. A map. One, she recognized instantly. The same pattern carved on the altar. The same that shimmered in the well of reflections. The same geometry embedded in the garden. The same mark above the doorway. A coordinate sequence. A path. A return. The disc emitted a soft tone, bell-like, layered, vibrating through the cavern, and the shattered discs on the floor responded. One by one, fragments scattered across the vast archive brightened. Faintly, hesitantly, like sparks remembering how to be fire. Hovan whispered. It's activating the broken ones. No, Doctor, Ilan murmured, breath trembling. It's recalling them. The fragments lifted. Hundreds. Thousands. Pieces of ancient clay rising from the stone floor like moths drawn toward moonlight. They swirled in slow spirals through the air, drifting toward the intact disc on the pedestal. Not to reconstruct it, no. This disc was whole, but to align with it, to echo it, to remember with it. The air shimmered. The broken chronicle rewrote itself in light. Across the cavern ceiling appeared a vast projection, gestures forming scenes, scenes forming history, history forming truth. A truth, long buried, long sealed. They saw a world before the desert, a world where the plateau was not barren, but vibrant, lush with ritual gardens, living structures, bioluminescent flora, where tall, slender beings, graceful, silent, moved among humans not as gods or rulers, but as keepers of something sacred, memory. They saw rituals of shared knowledge, humans and the others pressing hands to stone, activating the memory chambers. They saw processions descending into the vault beneath the plateau, carrying the disc, carrying the stones, carrying something wrapped in pale cloth. Then, chaos, a soundless calamity, light tearing, structures collapsing inward, the others fading, not dying, not fleeing, fading, like shadows losing shape. The gesture language faltered, the memory keepers vanished, the archive fractured, and everything that once held knowledge began to forget itself, until only this disc remained, preserved, protected, waiting for someone to complete its meaning. The light faded. The fragments drifted gently back to the floor, coming to rest as they had before, broken, scattered, silent. The cavern exhaled. Dr. Ilan pressed her hand to the pedestal. "This is their chronicle," she whispered. "Their history, their fall." "And why show us?" Hovan asked. The disc answered. It pulsed once, a single, intentional beat, and projected a final image onto the cavern wall. A chamber, circular, deep beneath even this archive. At its center, a structure shaped like a cocoon of stone and metal, closed, sealed, waiting. Dr. Elan's breath stilled. "That's what's below," she murmured. "That's what the platform was guiding us toward." A low vibration rumbled through the cavern in agreement. A doorway in the far wall split open, softly, revealing another descent. Narrow, dark, steep, leading deeper into the earth, deeper into memory, deeper into the heart of forgetting. Dr. Ilan lifted her lantern. The broken chronicle dimmed behind them. The hum strengthened ahead. The earth inhaled, and they followed, sanctuary singing in frequencies. The phrase drifted beneath Dr. Yara. Ilan's thoughts, like a vibration, felt through bone rather than heard through air, subtle, continuous, undeniable. As she and her team stepped through the newly opened doorway at the far end of the shattered archive, the cavern behind them fell into a hush, so complete it felt like the earth had closed its eyes. The descent ahead was narrow, steep, formed from dark stone polished by hands long vanished. Not carved, not chiseled, but shaped through pressure and heat, like memory pressed into matter. The hum guided them downward. Not a sound now, but a frequency low, steady, pulsing through the walls and into their ribs. Their lanterns trembled in synchrony, flames fluttering with each vibration, as though performing a slow ritual. Hovan whispered behind her. "The air. It feels thick, like it's carrying something." "It is," Dr. Ilan murmured. "Information, just like the walls of the chambers above, just like the archive, just like the garden. Everything here carried knowledge compressed, resonant, transmitted through frequencies rather than script." Scholars once speculated quietly, cautiously, that early civilizations might have understood sound as structure rather than expression. That rituals were not spoken beliefs but engineered acoustic events meant to shape consciousness, memory, and even stone. Most dismissed the idea. But now, descending into a chamber where the air itself was shaped by frequency, Dr. Ilan felt that forgotten theory settle into her mind like truth. The passage opened, a space unlike anything they had seen, a sanctuary, wide, circular. Its walls curved into a domed ceiling that shimmered faintly, as though coated in dust made of starlight. The stone floor bore concentric circles, raised ever so slightly, like the grooves of a vast, ancient record. A sanctuary singing in frequencies. Dr. Ilan stepped cautiously into the center. Her boot touched the first groove, and the air responded. A tone rippled through the chamber, low, round, warm, vibrating the lantern flame until it formed a perfect vertical line. The sound wasn't loud. It was felt. She stepped again. A second tone answered, higher, sharper, tingling at the base of the skull. Hovan swallowed. "The floor is tuned." "Not the floor," Dr. Ilan whispered. "The entire sanctuary." As she circled slowly, each groove emitted a different note together, forming a scale unlike any human system. A tonal architecture, a harmonic map. The sanctuary began to sing back. A soft chorus, layered, ancient. The air vibrated in waves that shimmered through dust motes like ripples through water. One of the researchers, voice trembling, said, "It sounds like voices." "It is voices," she murmured, encoded in resonance. They had entered a room built not to store memory in objects, but to remember through sound. Her lantern shook again. From behind the dome's curvature, new tones emerged, gentle at first, then clearer, resolving into a sequence. Not melody. Message. A chorus of frequencies aligning like words in a sentence, but not a sentence in any known language. She closed her eyes and let the vibrations settle into her bones. It was emotion, recognition, warning, invitation, and something like grief. The sanctuary remembered sorrow. She opened her eyes. The grooves began to glow faintly beneath her boots, thin blue lines brightening with each note. The pattern formed a spiral starting at the wall, tightening toward the center. Dr. Ilan stepped into it. The sanctuary responded. The tones aligned into a single crystal-clear frequency, one she had heard in the vault, at the altar, at the well. The frequency of the others. A deep vibration rolled through the sanctuary floor. The central circle, the innermost groove, lit up, and from its center rose a platform, circular, smooth, metallic, hovering a few inches above the stone. Its edges hummed with steady pulses of light. "The platform," Hovan whispered. "Like the one above." "No," Dr. Ilan murmured. "This one is different. This one is active." The hovering platform rotated slowly, revealing its underside lined with delicate filaments that vibrated in harmony with the sanctuary's tones. The platform wasn't metal. It wasn't stone. It was an instrument, a resonant device, a memory conduit. Dr. Ilan approached it. The platform brightened in recognition, just as the translation disc had in the vault. Her lantern dimmed as the platform drew energy from the air. A hum deepened. A new frequency emerged beneath the original tones, a rich, layered sound, as though the sanctuary had opened a second throat. Then, the platform projected something. Not light, not a hologram. Sound made visible. Patterns of vibration rose above its surface. Concentric rings of shimmering dust that shaped themselves into fleeting forms. Hands, faces, paths, pillars, stones. Every element of the plateau's mysteries flickered into view. It was replaying memory through trembling air. The resonance grew stronger. The dust shapes expanded, linking together in branching streams. The well of reflections. The pillars of disappearance. The garden hidden in coordinates. The altar draped in forgetting. The vault where time folded. The chamber of hands. The figure of light. All of it woven into a single tapestry of frequency. Hovan exhaled, staggered. "It's all connected. It always was," she whispered. The sanctuary tone shifted. Low to high, high to low, aligning into a single unbroken note. The hovering platform responded. It lifted higher, spun faster, projected a final, singular shape. A cocoon, stone and metal intertwined, resting in a chamber deeper than this one. The chamber they had been walking toward since the first shadow stirred. But the platform wasn't done. It drifted toward Dr. Ilan, stopping just inches from her chest, its surface glowing in steady pulsation. A question, a request, a call. Her breath trembled. It wants something. The tones aligned again, gathering into a simple, unmistakable resonance. A harmonic gesture, meaning, "Open," a researcher whispered. "Open what?" Hovan answered without looking away. "The cocoon." Dr. Ilan felt the truth settle into her bones. This sanctuary had been built as the final convergence, the place where all frequencies met, where memory sang itself awake, where the past waited to be unsealed. The hum deepened, shaking dust from the dome, vibrating into their teeth, filling their blood with rhythmic warmth. The floor beneath the platform split open, revealing another passage. Not stone, not metal, a conduit of pure, resonant material, black, smooth, curved like a throat. Warm air drifted upward, alive, organic, waiting. Dr. Ilan stepped toward it. The sanctuary dimmed its song, lowering into a soft, patient murmur, a lullaby for something stirring below. The hovering platform drifted ahead into the passage, leading the way like a glowing guide. The team followed. As they descended into the humming dark, Dr. Ilan placed her hand on the wall, warm, vibrating, alive. The sanctuary's final message trembled through it. The cocoon remembers you. Open it. And beneath that, a deeper frequency, ancient and trembling, barely audible, but unmistakably alive. And something inside remembers itself. Beacon lit for the invisible. The phrase drifted at the edge of Dr. Yara. Ilan's awareness, like a lantern flame, glimpsed through fog, soft, wavering, ancient. As she descended behind the hovering platform into the resonant throat of the earth, She felt the hum from the sanctuary fading behind them, replaced by a new frequency, higher, thinner, almost like a whisper carried across great distance. A beacon, calling not to the living, but to whatever lay sealed below. The passage narrowed, curving in a slow downward spiral that shimmered faintly with internal light. Not bright, not steady, but flickering with pulses that responded to their movements. The walls here were smooth as glass, warm beneath the touch, and lined with thin veins of luminescent silver like the cosmic threads woven into the manuscript centuries above. The hovering platform drifted ahead, casting a ring of pale light across the dark. Unlike the mechanical hover discs of science fiction, this one moved organically, adjusting its height and rotation as if sniffing out frequencies hidden in the stone. "It's guiding us," Hovan murmured. "No," Dr. Ilan whispered. "It's answering something." They followed it deeper. The air grew warmer, richer with minerals, almost metallic. A faint breeze brushed their faces, impossible at this depth, unless the chamber below had its own breath. And through the stone, through the air, through the pulse in their bones, Dr. Ilan sensed it. Something alive, something waiting, something listening. At the base of the spiral throat, the passage widened suddenly into a long causeway of pale stone. Bioluminescent motes drifted across the floor like sparks blown from an unseen fire. Each mote pulsed softly, reacting to the platform's presence. A beacon trail, the invisible answering the invisible. Ahead lay a chamber unlike any they had seen. Oval, perfectly smooth, its ceiling arched high above, like the ribcage of some colossal creature. And, in the center, resting on a cradle of curved supports, hung the cocoon. If the word cocoon felt strange in an archaeological context, it felt exactly right here. The structure was the size of a large sarcophagus, but its shape was organic, elongated and rounded, with smooth, layered surfaces resembling petrified silk or hardened resin. Its material was neither stone nor metal, but something between an alloy-like shell darkened by age yet faintly luminous, glowing with slow pulses of inner light. It hovered a few inches above its cradle, drifting slightly as though suspended in a controlled field. A beacon lit for the invisible, because the air around it thrummed softly, like a lantern glowing in a world where nothing visible had eyes to see. Like a call made not to the living but to memory itself. Dr. Ilan stepped closer. The shell responded. Its inner glow brightened just slightly, like a creature stirring in sleep. The pulsing veins across its surface warmed, shifting from pale blue to soft silver. The hovering platform drifted toward it and settled beside the cradle, humming in a tone that matched the cocoon's heartbeat. "Is it alive?" someone whispered. "No organism known to science creates material like this," Hovan murmured. "This isn't biology." Dr. Ilan shook her head. "Not biology, memory. The cocoon was built to house something. Protect it, preserve it, hide it." The hum deepened, vibrating through the floor, up their legs, into their chests. A resonant signal, a call to whoever held the disc, to whoever carried the missing stones, to whoever reached the chamber last. To her, the hovering platform lowered itself and projected a lattice of vibrating dust above the cocoon, shifting shapes and symbols. Not gestures this time, not the hand language of the others, something simpler, something older. A series of pulses, a timed sequence, a frequency key. Dr. Ilan raised the disc. Its glowing lines rearranged, matching the platform's pulses, syncing perfectly. The cocoon responded. A seam appeared along its length, thin as a hairline crack, trembling with faint white light. The team froze. Hovan whispered, "Dr. Ilan, once it opens, we can't undo this. I know. Whatever's inside. I know." Silence. Only the hum remained soft but insistent. The cocoon pulsed like a sleeping heart. Dr. Ilan stepped forward and pressed the disc gently against the glowing seam. The chamber exhaled. A deep, warm breath swept outward, extinguishing their lantern flames in a single unified flicker. For a terrifying moment, they were left in complete darkness. Then, the cocoon opened, not with hinges, not with cracking stone, but with a slow unfurling, like petals unfolding underwater. Light seeped from within, pale, silver, gentle, steady, revealing a form inside, human, almost, but taller, slender, with elongated limbs and smooth, luminous skin marked by faint, swirling patterns like constellations drawn directly into flesh. Its eyes were closed, its face serene. Not a corpse, not a fossil, a sleeper, a preserved being. The hum deepened into a melodic frequency, rich, layered, harmonic, the sanctuary's language. And then the figure breathed, a soft inhale, so subtle they might have imagined it. Drawing warm air into long, thin lungs, its chest rose, fell, rose again, alive. Hovan stumbled backward. It's breathing, my God, it's breathing. The body twitched, just once. A slow, small movement of fingers, the same elongated hands they had seen echoing in chambers above. Hands that knew, hands that had carved memory, hands that had reached through the shimmering doorway, hands that shaped the vault. Dr. Ilan whispered, "This is one of them." Another breath, this one deeper. Then the fingers moved again, forming a gesture. A spiral, an arc, a beckoning. The same gesture that meant, remember, return, awake. The figure's eyes opened, silver irises, depthless, reflecting not light but memory. The hum stopped. Silence hit the chamber like a held breath. The figure looked at Dr. Ilan, directly, clearly, unmistakably aware, and in a soft, trembling voice, like a whisper woven from distant centuries. It spoke a single word, not translated, not human, but understood. A word meaning, "You came." Dr. Ilan took a breath, and the chamber's darkness stirred like a vast creature preparing to rise. Something deep below vibrated, awakening in response to the sleeper's voice. The beacon had been lit, and the invisible was finally arriving. Remains that held their breath. The phrase drifted through Dr. Yara Ilan's consciousness like a trembling bead of condensation, sliding down cold glass, slow, glistening, inevitable. As the being's silver eyes opened fully, steady as distant moons, she felt the entire chamber contract around them, as though the stone itself were drawing one long, anticipatory breath. The others stood frozen. Light flickered across their faces in pale waves. Even the hovering platform grew still, as if bowing to a presence it had been made to serve. The awakened figure, tall, slender, luminous, sat slowly within the opened cocoon, its movements fluid, almost weightless, like the first stretch of something remembering what motion felt like. Its elongated fingers brushed the cocoon's interior surface, tracing the swirling patterns carved into the shell. The patterns brightened beneath its touch, responding with faint pulses of silver-blue light, a cradle of memory greeting its keeper. Dr. Ilan felt her throat tighten, not in fear, but in awe so profound it felt like grief. This is what everything was pointing toward," she whispered. The figure inhaled softly, an elegant, elongated breath, and exhaled in a slow, controlled stream that drifted into the chamber like warm mist. Lanterns flickered, bending toward the exhalation, as if pulled by soundless instructions. Hovan moved beside her, eyes wide. "It's alive. My God, it survived." No one corrected him. No one whispered theories. There was nothing to say except what the heart already knew. The being lifted one hand, a single gesture, flowing, spiraling, gentle, a greeting, a recognition, an acknowledgement. Dr. Ilan raised her own hand, slowly mirroring the gesture. The being watched her carefully, head tilting with the same curious elegance they had seen, echoed in the shadow figures, throughout the plateau's memory vaults. Then its fingers shifted, forming a new gesture in a sequence so familiar her breath caught. The act of knowing. The gesture carved into burial stones, pressed into the corridor walls, captured in the archive's chronicle, performed by floating hands in the chamber above. The being's version was softer, imbued with an emotion the replicas lacked: recognition, relief, return. With slow deliberation, the being stepped out of the cocoon. Though its feet touched the ground, it did not fully bear its weight. Rather, the floor rippled upward to meet it, forming a gentle, responsive surface. The alcove beneath the cocoon glowed, as if drawing energy from the awakening. The hum returned, not from the sanctuary above, not from the walls or the platform, from the being itself. A soft harmonic tone rose from its chest, neither spoken nor sung, but released like a resonance the body had been holding for centuries. The chamber vibrated gently. Dust climbed into the air, swirling like tiny constellations gathering around the cocoon. And in that swirling dust, the faint outlines of hands appeared. Dozens of them, hundreds. Not fully formed, not solid. Echoes. Hands belonging to those whose remains they had seen in the burial circle, faces tilted skyward, spines curved in the same knowing gesture. Not ghosts, not spirits. Memories preserved in pattern, in frequency, in silence, the remains that held their breath. Dr. Ilan felt cold rise along her spine. The echo hands drifted slowly, forming a loose orbit around the awakened being, and the being watched them with a calm, almost mournful gaze. Its expression did not change, but the tone in the air altered, growing heavier, deeper, layered with something like sorrow. "Are they its people?" someone whispered. The being turned toward the speaker, not hostile, not threatening, simply aware. Its mouth, previously motionless, moved for the first time. "You here?" The voice was soft, layered, simultaneously singular and plural. Dr. Ilan stepped closer. "We're trying to understand." The being tilted its head. "Understand, remembering." The echo hands drifted nearer to the cocoon. Some hovered inches above its surface, fingers aligned with glowing patterns on the shell. Others pointed toward the cradle beneath, as if referencing something deeply familiar. Hovan swallowed hard. They were waiting for it to wake. "No," Dr. Ilan whispered. They were waiting for someone to wake it. The being's gaze rested on her again. Long, measured, kind. "You came." The words echoed exactly as before, but this time their meaning felt fuller. Less a greeting, more confirmation. A statement woven with recognition, not from meeting her personally, but from recognizing the frequencies she carried, the burial stone, the manuscript thread, the garden's encoded coordinates, the gestures she unconsciously mirrored, the echoes she followed through each chamber. The plateau had been selecting her since the beginning. The being raised one hand toward the echo hands, drifting in the chamber. They gathered around its outstretched palm, forming a swirling constellation of memory. Then, like dust blown from a forgotten tapestry, they drifted toward Dr. Ilan. Her lantern dimmed. Shadows folded around her. Warmth brushed her cheeks. The hands hovered inches from her chest, pulsing softly. Hovan stepped forward. "Yara." She shook her head. "It's all right." The echo hands settled gently against her skin and dissolved into her in a silent burst of warmth. For a moment, she felt weightless, floating between breath and memory. And then, she saw, not visions cast on a vault wall, not symbolic projections, but lived memory, direct, sensory, complete. She stood on the plateau thousands of years earlier. Lush gardens shimmered beneath the sun. The others moved in graceful arcs, their gestures weaving through air like calligraphy. Humans walked beside them, hands raised not in worship but in synchrony. Together, they tended the chambers. Together, they shaped memory. Together, they preserved something vital. Then, a rupture, light torn open, frequency collapsing inward. A split in the sanctuary's heart. The others falling to their knees, hands lifted in desperate gestures to seal something away before it escaped. Not evil, not monstrous, something overwhelming, knowledge itself, a force too vast to hold. They sealed it inside the cocoon. They buried themselves in gestures of knowing. They carved warnings into stone. They hid their memory in clay, metal, vegetation, and breath. And then they held their breath, waiting for the one who could understand the gestures they left behind. The vision collapsed gently. Dr. Ilan returned to the chamber, trembling but steady. The being watched her with an expression that almost resembled relief. "You remember?" Its voice vibrated through the air, like a tuning fork struck softly. Dr. Ilan nodded. "Yes." The being turned its head slowly toward the cocoon, its shell now dimming as though its purpose had been fulfilled. Then toward the dark passage behind them, the one that had opened when she placed the missing stone on the platform. "The heart," it whispered. Hovan frowned. "The heart of what?" The being lifted both hands, forming a gesture so fluid and elegant it seemed to bend the air around it. The echo hands mimicked the gesture, circling into alignment. The gesture meant the heart of the memory that must be carried. Dr. Ilan took a step closer. "The heart is deeper still." The being nodded. Slow, grave. Below, another vibration rippled through the floor. Soft, but unmistakably alive. Something stirred far beneath them. Not threatening, not welcoming, but awake. Hovan's voice cracked. "What's down there?" The being turned its luminous gaze toward him. Its pupils, if they were pupils, widened slightly. "Us!" The chamber shuddered. A low, resonant tone vibrated through the dark passage ahead. The cocoon sealed itself softly, folding into its shell like a flower closing at dusk. The being stepped past Dr. Ilan, its movements smooth, deliberate, and stood before the new passage. Its voice dropped to a lower frequency, gentle, steady, solemn. "Come." It paused. For them, the remains that held their breath, the countless who had sealed themselves in stone, frozen mid-gesture, waiting for the moment memory could return. For them, the descent awaited. The darkness ahead breathed, warm, slow, rhythmic, like the ancient lungs of the plateau, stirring from millennia of sleep. The being stepped into the dark. Dr. Ilan followed, heart trembling. The final chamber, the heart of everything, was waiting. And something inside was ready to be remembered. Threshold that hums at dusk. The phrase unfurled through Dr. Yara Ilan's mind like a ribbon of twilight woven through memory. Soft, dusky, trembling with a tone she felt before she understood. As she followed the awakened being into the narrowing passage, the chamber behind them dimmed, sealing itself in a hush that felt like a held breath. The path ahead sloped gently downward, the air warming with each step. The stone grew smoother, darker, until the walls had the sheen of obsidian under deep water. Thin veins of light, silver, blue, and faint gold ran along the floor like drifting roots, pulsing in gentle rhythms. The being walked without hesitation. Not gliding each step touched the ground, but lightly, with a fluid certainty that suggested intimate memory of the path. The passage responded to its presence. Every time a foot fell, the floor brightened beneath it, and the ceiling hummed, tuning itself to the creature's breath. Hoven whispered behind Dr. Ilan, "It's waking the corridor." "No," she murmured. "It's reminding it who it is." The hum deepened. Low, gentle, alive. A dusk tone. The kind that sifts through ancient ruins, just as the sun drops below the horizon. The threshold that hums at dusk. The being turned its luminous gaze toward Dr. Ilan, as if sensing her thought. "Threshold," it repeated softly, its layered voice carrying the strange resonance of countless remembered hours. A place. Between what? Past and future? Memory and forgetting? Life and something older? They followed deeper. The corridor widened abruptly into a long hall. A hall carved with spirals so immense that their lanterns could trace only fragments of each curve. The spirals glowed faintly, lighting the enormous chamber in a dusk-like tint, blue at the edges, gold at the center, like the horizon moments after the last sunlight slips away. At the far end glowed a doorway, tall, narrow, edged in soft silver, shimmering with heat that wasn't heat, light that wasn't light. A threshold, and it hummed. A long, low tone, vibrating not through the air, but through mind and bone. Not loud enough to hear, but impossible not to feel. A hum, like a held note on an ancient instrument. It pulsed at dusk frequencies. Slow, warm. Twillet, the awakened being, paused beside Dr. Ilan. Its eyes dimmed to a gentle glow. Silver irises reflecting the doorway's light, as if remembering it from dreams. "This," it whispered, "is the place where we ended, and where you begin." The others stood frozen, lanterns trembling in their hands. Every instinct told them they were standing before something vast, something the plateau, the chambers, the vault, and the sanctuary had all been leading them toward with a careful, ancient patience. Dr. Ilan felt it too. She stepped closer. The hum shifted, deepening in pitch, adjusting to match her breathing. The floor warmed underfoot. The spirals on the walls brightened. The being remained beside her, hands at its sides, palms open in the gesture of remembering. "You carry the echoes," it murmured. "You understand the pattern." She lifted the disc instinctively. It pulsed, glowing softly, its lines sliding into alignment with the doorway's resonance. "Beyond this," the being whispered, "is the heart, the memory we sealed, the breath we held." A soft vibration rippled through the hall, dust drifting upward like fireflies. The threshold brightened, not like an invitation, not like a warning, like a dusk horizon holding open a road. Hoven took a shaky breath. "What happens when we cross it?" The being tilted its head, considering the question with a patience no human could replicate. "When we sealed the heart, time folded. A pause. Memory froze. Those who held it became echoes. "And if we unseal it?" she whispered. The being blinked slowly. "We breathe." The hum deepened again, vibrating the chamber floor. Dr. Elan stepped toward the threshold, and the doorway widened, as though recognizing her descent through the plateau's labyrinth. Her gestures echoed from long-dead hands, her mind carrying the memory that had been waiting thousands of years to be recalled. But before she reached it, something moved. A shadow peeled from the far wall, sliding across the floor in a long, deliberate arc. Its outline was tall, thin, familiar. One of the shadow figures that had followed them since the well. One of the watchers. One of the remnants. Dr. Elan froze. The awakened being turned slowly, its gaze steady, almost serene. The shadow stopped several paces away and lifted its hand. The same gesture carved in burial circles, embedded in passage walls, frozen in the act of knowing. Only this time, the gesture trembled. The being raised its own hand in response. A mirror, a reassurance. Light passed between them, thin as silk, bridging the space with a soft, trembling glow. The shadow steadied. Its gesture changed. It pointed toward the threshold, then toward Dr. Elan, then toward the darkness beyond. A message, unmistakably clear. "You must go, and we cannot." The shadow dissolved softly, as if relieved to have carried its last burden. The hum swelled. The threshold brightened. The being turned back to her. "You see," it whispered. Why they held their breath. She nodded, throat tight. "To protect what couldn't be destroyed. To protect what could not be understood," it corrected gently. "Until now." Dr. Elan stepped forward, her lantern dimmed to a sliver, its flame bending toward the humming doorway like a drawn-out thread of light. She crossed the boundary. Warm dusk light wrapped around her, soft as silk, weightless, silent. And then the world shifted. It wasn't like stepping into a room, or a cave, or a vault. It was like stepping into memory itself. Dim spirals curved around her, spinning slowly, folding inward and outward in steady rhythm. She felt time stretch, thin, then rearrange itself. The air shimmered, neither warm nor cold. There was no floor beneath her feet, only a soft resistance, as though she were standing on a surface made of breath. The awakened being stepped through behind her. The threshold sealed with a whisper. A chamber unfurled before them, vast, silent, filled with floating shapes. Not hands this time, not gestures, not echoes. People, dozens of them, humans and others alike, still, serene, suspended in faint columns of dusk light. Their bodies were not alive, not dead, not decayed, preserved, mid-motion, breath caught in the act of remembering. Remains that had held their breath. Dr. Elan's chest tightened. "These are the ones who stayed," the being murmured beside her. "Those who chose to hold the memory inside themselves until it was safe." "And now?" she whispered. "Now," the being said softly. "You breathe for them." It extended its hand toward the central column of light, a pillar thicker and brighter than the others. Patterns spiraled within it, like a galaxy asleep. The being's voice deepened. "Our heart, our memory, our burden. And you want me to wake it?" "Not wake," it whispered. "Release." A long silence settled between them, quiet as dusk, heavy as twilight air. Dr. Elan stepped toward the column. Her hand rose. Her fingers trembled. The column pulsed. Hoven's voice echoed faintly from behind the threshold, but could not reach her now. This moment was hers. A moment thousands of years in the making. A breath held through centuries of forgotten chambers. She touched the light. It inhaled. A long, deep, ancient breath. The suspended figures around her shifted, breathing again. Hands loosening from gestures held too long. Eyes fluttering behind closed lids. Memory uncoiling. The being beside her closed its eyes. The column warmed, spiraled, unfolded. Something stirred at its core. Not a creature, not a person, but a presence. A vast, gentle awareness. Old as the plateau, soft as dusk wind, patient as stone. It pressed into her thoughts like a hand resting on her shoulder. "You remember us. Now we remember you." The chamber brightened, spiraling outward, and the threshold hummed a final low note, vibrating through every bone in her body, signaling that the ancient memory was finally, slowly, exhaling. Conclusion. The desert night had stretched wide and silent above the plateau, its wind brushing softly over ancient stones, as though carrying the last sighs of forgotten centuries. Beneath that quiet world, in chambers carved from memory and silence, Dr. Yara Ilan stood at the edge of a truth that had waited far longer than any human voice could count. The threshold dimmed behind her. The final breath of the ancient presence settled gently through the chamber, like dust released from a tapestry. Not bright, not dark, simply restful. The suspended figures, human and other alike, floated in their soft columns of dusk light, no longer burdened with holding the sealed heart of memory. Their gestures had softened, their faces eased. The long-held tension in the air dissolved like mist burned away at dawn, and the presence, vast, patient, gentle, receded into the chamber walls, not vanishing but blending, as though returning to the stone that had shaped and sheltered it. The being at her side exhaled, its voice a quiet harmony. "It breathes again," it whispered. Dr. Ilan nodded, the truth warming through her, like the slow glow of distant lanterns. "So do you." Far above, the plateau was no longer humming with restless echoes. Its breaths had steadied. The pillars of disappearance no longer clung to their trembling shadows. The garden, the vault, the sanctuary, all of them seemed to settle into a deeper calm, their memories released rather than bound. Nothing had been undone. Nothing had been erased. The ancient story had simply been allowed to finish exhaling. She stepped back toward the threshold. Its shimmer opened like twilight, folding its arms around a weary traveler. With each step up through the chambers, past the singing sanctuary, past the broken archive, past the vault and its time-folded histories, the hum softened into silence. The desert breeze greeted her as she emerged into starlight once more, warm and steady, carrying no warnings, no trembling shadows, only peace. A peace thousands of years overdue. Behind her, the plateau seemed to take one final, satisfied breath. Not a goodbye, a release. As if the earth itself had whispered, "You remembered us. Now, rest." And beneath the endless sky, Dr. Ilan did.